Hi, I'm May Ling and I'm 29 years old. Growing up Asian American has its challenges, especially being Chinese American like me. I've faced some unfair treatment because of my background. I've learned to stand up for myself and not let discrimination bring me down. Life has taught me to be tough, so I can handle whatever comes my way. But sometimes people can still surprise me with their ignorance. Take my father-in-law, for example. He doesn't seem to understand how tough it can be to be different in America. Let me tell you about my family. My husband, Mateo, is from the Dominican Republic, and I'm Chinese American. We love exploring each other's cultures and traditions. Recently, Mateo's stepdad, Hiroshi, joined our family. He's also from East Asia like me, which I thought was cool. I was excited to have someone who understood my background. But things changed when Hiroshi came into our lives. Mateo and his mom, Sofia, started speaking more Spanish, especially when Hiroshi was around. At first, I didn't think much of it since Spanish is their first language. Plus, they weren't saying anything bad. I know because I speak Spanish too. I want to surprise my husband by learning Spanish. He really appreciates it when people do things for him, so I thought learning his language would make us closer. I kept it a secret for longer than I planned because I was afraid to tell them I could understand what they were saying. Even though I was getting better at Spanish, I was still scared of making mistakes and embarrassing myself. Maybe my fear was a good thing because when Hiroshi came into the picture, Sofia and Mateo started speaking Spanish more often. I thought it was best not to speak Spanish during those times. I mean, imagine joining a family with different cultures and feeling left out by everyone. Out of respect for Hiroshi and because we both shared East Asian backgrounds, I kept talking to him in English. I found it a bit strange that they were speaking Spanish more, but I didn't think much of it. That is, until I started hearing insults in Spanish that really surprised me. I remember that day vividly, like it just happened. We were all gathered around the table, ready to enjoy a meal together. The food smelled amazing, and we were chatting happily. But then disaster struck. I accidentally spilled gravy everywhere when I reached for the gravy boat. It was like a river of regret flowing across the table. You can imagine the chaos that followed. Sofia, my mother-in-law, started swearing in Spanish. Even though I'm not fluent in Spanish, I could tell she was saying mean things about me. It hurt, but Mateo, my husband, stood up for me. He told his mom that her insults weren't okay. Then Sofia said something that broke my heart. She asked Mateo why he was defending me when she thought I couldn't understand what she was saying anyway. Those words hit me hard. It hurt even more than her insults earlier. I felt so embarrassed and shocked that she would say something like that. It felt like she was used to talking about me behind my back in her language. I choked on my water, feeling overwhelmed. But Hiroshi, my father-in-law, comforted me. He reminded me that everyone makes mistakes and accidents happen. He even said there was more gravy in the pot, trying to lighten the mood. Hiroshi didn't know that it wasn't the spilled gravy that left me breathless. It was Sophia's hurtful words questioning my worth. I couldn't shake off the doubt that crept into my mind. Did I hear her correctly? Was I losing touch with reality? I couldn't believe that my own mother-in-law, who should have been supportive, would speak about me like that. After dinner, haunted by Sophia's words, I needed confirmation. I asked a Spanish-speaking friend and even used Google Translate. Unfortunately, my fears were true. Sofia had intentionally been rude and disrespectful. I couldn't understand why she felt that way about me. I kept my discoveries to myself for now, deciding to watch our family dynamics and wait for the right time to address this. The next morning, as we sat at the breakfast table, there was an awkward silence. I sat quietly, thinking hard, while the others chatted as usual. Sofia and Mateo started speaking in Spanish, unaware of the impact their words had. Suddenly, Sofia said something shocking. "I regret marrying this old, stupid man," Sofia said, unaware that I understood her words. My heart sank as I heard her. Once again, Sofia had revealed her true feelings, ruining our mealtime harmony. Meanwhile, Hiroshi chuckled and said, "I should learn Spanish so I can understand what you two are always talking about." If only he knew the painful truth behind their laughter. Sofia and Mateo pretended it was all harmless teasing, hiding the hurtful gossip they were sharing right in front of him. But the gossip didn't stop there. Mateo and Sofia continued, each comment more hurtful than the last. Let me give you some examples. They mocked Hiroshi's accent, mimicking his attempts to pronounce certain words. They laughed at his cultural traditions, saying they were strange or unnecessary. And they made jokes about his age, saying he was past his prime. As I sat there, I felt more and more uncomfortable. It was like watching a cruel game where Hiroshi was the target of their teasing without even knowing it. My heart hurt for him, knowing he was being hurt by his own family. This wasn't the love and acceptance I hoped for when our cultures came together. In that moment, I promised myself I wouldn't stay silent anymore. Sophia might have said hurtful things about me, but I wouldn't let her treat this kind old man the same way. I knew I had to address the tension in our family to make them see the value of our diverse backgrounds and the importance of treating each other with kindness. As time passed, I became more determined to expose Mateo and Sophia's unkind treatment of Hiroshi. Armed with my phone, I started recording their hurtful conversations during meals. I wanted to show them their behavior and its impact. With each meal, I discreetly captured their words, knowing they would reveal the truth. As their insults grew harsher, Hiroshi started to notice something was wrong. He and I were constantly left out, and it was clear something needed to change. As Hiroshi felt more excluded, his lively spirit dimmed. I tried to guide our conversations in English to include everyone, but Mateo and Sophia always switched back to Spanish, shutting us out. Their gossip and insults towards Hiroshi ruined the atmosphere at meals. When I listened to the recordings, I realized something heartbreaking. Sophia had married Hiroshi for his money, regretting that she couldn't inherit his fortune until he passed away. I was shocked by her greed, and Mateo, my husband, not only joined in the insults but found them funny, supporting his mother's awful intentions. The realization hit me hard. How could I have missed their true colors? These were the people I trusted to embrace and celebrate our diverse family, yet they have betrayed that trust. I knew I had to do something, not just for Hiroshi's sake, but for the respect and love our family deserved. Late into the night, I listened to those recordings, steeling myself to confront Mateo and Sophia with the evidence of their cruelty. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I couldn't let them continue hurting us. As I planned my approach, I promised myself I wouldn't let their toxicity ruin our lives any longer. Hiroshi deserved better, and so did our family. Determined to make a change, I geared up to confront Mateo and Sophia about their hurtful actions. But before I faced them, I knew one thing. Hiroshi needed to hear the truth first. He deserved to know. Gathering my courage, I approached Hiroshi, sensing his heavy heart. With a comforting smile, I asked, "Hey Hiroshi, how are you holding up?" He sighed and met my gaze, his vulnerability clear. "May Ling, it's been tough, honestly. I'm having a hard time fitting into this new family setup. The constant use of Spanish makes me feel left out, like I don't belong. Maybe I should consider those Spanish classes after all." Understanding his struggle, I nodded sympathetically. "I hear you, Hiroshi. It's been bothering me too. But there's something important I need to tell you." He looked intrigued, curious about what I had to say. "What's on your mind, May Ling?" Taking a deep breath, I confessed the secret I'd been keeping. "Hiroshi, I understand Spanish. I've been following every conversation Mateo and Sofia have had. They didn't know because I never joined in on the Spanish talks. I kept it to myself because I felt nervous and embarrassed about my language skills, but I do understand them completely." Hiroshi looked surprised. "Why didn't he tell them?" "I'm sure they would have helped you with your Spanish." I smiled sadly. "You're probably right, Hiroshi. I was just nervous and embarrassed. I wanted to surprise Mateo once I learned enough Spanish to have a real conversation, but I kept delaying it, worried he wouldn't be impressed. Still, maybe it's a good thing I didn't tell them." "Why do you say that?" "By keeping this secret, I was able to hear their conversations, and what I heard wasn't good. They'd been talking about you behind your back, saying hurtful things. The language barrier protected them, but now they'll have to face the consequences." Hiroshi looked confused and concerned. "What do you mean? What have they been saying about me?" I took his hands in mine, speaking firmly. "Hiroshi, they've been making fun of you, mocking you, and saying mean things about you. It's been happening for weeks, and it's terrible that they can talk about you like that." His eyes showed a mix of surprise, hurt, and gratitude. I don't know what to say. "Thank you for telling me the truth. I never thought they would do something like this." "What exactly have they been saying?" he asked, bracing himself for the harsh reality. "Hiroshi, I know this is hard to hear, but I have to be honest with you. Sophia married you for your money, and both she and Mateo are waiting for you to pass away so they can inherit your fortune." As my words sank in, Hiroshi's disbelief turned into shock and confusion. "No, May Ling, that can't be true. Sophia loves me and Mateo loves me too. They wouldn't do that. Are you sure you're being honest with me? Maybe it's you who's trying to deceive me. With determination, I assured him, Hiroshi, I wouldn't bring this up without evidence. I recorded their conversations, and you can hear it for yourself. Ask any Spanish-speaking person you know to confirm what they're saying. I then airdropped the recordings to Hiroshi's phone, letting him uncover the truth for himself. Days passed, and the tension between Hiroshi, Sophia, and Mateo grew thicker. I gave Hiroshi space to process everything. Then, one day, he pulled me aside, his face showing a mix of acceptance and gratitude. I owe you an apology. I doubted you, blinded by my love for Sophia. But after talking to my Spanish-speaking friends and listening to those recordings, I believe you. I can't believe they said such awful things about me. What did I do to deserve this? I know, Hiroshi, it's a lot to take in, and I'm sorry, but I felt you needed to know the truth. I've decided to get an annulment. I'm old, May. I can't waste time with people who don't care about me. It's just hard to believe you'll be leaving so soon. Leaving sounds like the right move. I think you should do it. This will be my last night here. Tomorrow, I'll go and won't contact Sophia and Mateo until I'm ready to start the annulment process. But for now, I think I need a break. You deserve real love and peace, Hiroshi, and so do I. With that, Hiroshi and I hugged, and then we both went our separate ways. The next day, just as he said, Hiroshi was gone. He packed his things and left, leaving Sophia and Mateo confused and free to keep talking badly about him. As I put away the dishes, I could hear Sophia and Mateo in the nearby living room. Their insults towards Hiroshi made me furious. Why were they being so cruel? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. With a surge of confidence, I decided to confront them about their hurtful behavior. Enough was enough. I know exactly what you've been saying about Hiroshi in your secret Spanish conversations, I said firmly. Sophia's face went pale, and she looked shocked. Mateo tried to act innocent. You don't know what you're talking about, he insisted. At that moment, I unleashed a side of me they had never seen before. Speaking fluent Spanish, I confronted them directly. Don't underestimate me. I've understood everything you two have been saying for the past 3 weeks. You've been insulting and disrespecting Hiroshi since he entered our lives. Mateo looked embarrassed, avoiding eye contact. They were caught in their lies. Finally, Mateo spoke up, his voice filled with curiosity, regret, and perhaps even hurt. Why didn't you tell me you could speak Spanish? You're really good. I gave a bitter smile. I was embarrassed by my imperfect Spanish, but now I see that it helped me uncover the truth about your true intentions towards Hiroshi. Their eyes widened in shock, struggling to comprehend the gravity of the situation. Sophia's voice shook as she asked, What do you mean, May Ling? I took a deep breath, revealing the truth bit by bit. I've told Hiroshi everything. He's on vacation now, away from this toxic environment. And because of what he's learned, he's going to pursue an annulment. So you won't get the money. Confusion and panic filled the room as Sophia and Mateo realized the consequences of their actions. The realization that their pursuit of Hiroshi's wealth had been fruitless left them stunned. You see, Sophia and Mateo, greed and manipulation may have clouded your judgment temporarily. But in the end, the truth won out. Hiroshi's fortune will never be yours. Your betrayal shattered his love and trust. As the reality of their actions sank in, Sophia and Mateo faced the consequences of their greed and deceit. The facade they had built around Hiroshi crumbled, and their dreams of an easy fortune vanished. In that moment, I stood firm, knowing I had spoken up for what was right, even if it strained our family's fragile harmony. Unfortunately, the damage had been done, and tension lingered between Mateo, Sophia, and me. Realizing the toxicity of the situation, I knew I couldn't stay any longer. If they could treat Hiroshi like that, who knows what they said about me? Their true colors had been exposed, and I couldn't ignore the toxicity in our relationship. Quietly, I started planning my exit. I reached out to Hiroshi for guidance and support. He, being the kind soul he was, encouraged me and even offered financial help to start anew. He knew I deserved better than the toxic environment we were in. I waited for the right moment to tell them I was leaving. The tension in the house was thick, with Mateo and Sophia carrying the weight of their failed scheme. They were angry and resentful, hiding any remorse they might have felt. With my preparations complete, I gathered the courage to make the clean break. The perfect moment came, and with my bags packed and determination in my heart, I faced Mateo and Sophia. I calmly told them that their actions had destroyed the trust and love between us. Staying in such a toxic environment would only hurt us more. Their faces twisted with anger and regret as they realized the consequences of their behavior. In that moment, I made my decision to leave. Standing tall, I asserted my worth and declared my independence. Their attempts to persuade me otherwise were futile. I had made up my mind, and nothing could change it. With a final farewell, I walked away from the toxicity that had plagued our lives, stepping into a new chapter. As I journeyed towards self-discovery and freedom, I carried the lessons learned with me. No longer would I be confined by others' expectations and judgments. I had found my voice and would use it to shape my destiny, leaving behind the negativity that once consumed me. It was time to embrace my strength and forge a path true to myself.
The first thing I noticed when I stepped through the front door was the silence. No welcoming embrace, no warm words of congratulations, just the faint smell of stale beer and takeout. "James?" I called out, my voice echoing through our once cozy home. I shifted baby Ethan in my arms, his tiny face scrunched up in sleep. After 2 weeks at my mother's house recovering from the birth, I'd expected, well, something more than this. The living room was a mess. Pizza boxes stacked on the coffee table, empty beer cans scattered across the floor. I sighed, feeling the weight of motherhood and housekeeping already pressing down on my shoulders. "In here?" James's gruff voice came from the kitchen. I steeled myself and walked in, hoping to see a hint of the man I'd married. He was slouched at the table, scrolling through his phone. He barely glanced up as I entered. "Oh, you're back." "Yes, we're home," I said, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "Did you miss us?" James shrugged, his eyes still on his screen. "Sure. How's the kid?" "Ethan," I corrected gently. "His name is Ethan, remember? Would you like to hold him?" Finally, James looked up. His eyes widened, and not in a good way. "Jesus, Alicia, you look different." I felt my cheeks flush. "I just had a baby, James. It takes time for the body to—" Yeah, he waved his hand dismissively. "Just maybe lay off the ice cream for a while." "Huh? You're looking a bit puffy." The words hit me like a slap. I clutched Ethan closer, as if to shield him from his father's callousness. "I can't believe you just said that." James stood up, stretching lazily. "What? I'm just being honest. You asked me if I missed you, and honestly, I missed the old Alicia, the hot one." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I'm still me, James. I'm just adjusting." He snorted, grabbing another beer from the fridge. "Yeah, well, adjust faster. I didn't sign up for a mom bod." The room seemed to spin around me. Was this really happening? Was this the man I'd chosen to father my child? "I'm going to put Ethan down for a nap," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe you could clean up a bit while I'm gone?" James just grunted, already back to his phone. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like a mountain. When I reached the nursery, pristine and untouched since I'd left for the hospital, I finally let the tears fall. "Oh, Ethan," I whispered, gently laying him in his crib. "I'm so sorry. I thought your daddy would be different." As I stood there watching my perfect little boy sleep, a strange feeling began to creep over me. It wasn't just sadness or disappointment. It was something darker, something I'd never felt before. Rage. How dare he? How dare James treat me like this after everything I'd been through? The sleepless nights, the pain, the fear. All to bring his son into the world. And this was how he repaid me? I clenched my fists, a plan already forming in my mind. If James wanted the old Alicia back, he'd get her, but not in the way he expected. "I promise you, Ethan," I whispered fiercely, "Mommy's going to fix this, and Daddy, he's going to regret ever taking us for granted." As if in response, Ethan's tiny hand reached out, grasping my finger. In that moment, I knew. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about us, and I would do whatever it took to protect my son from a father who clearly didn't deserve him. The game was on, and James had no idea what was coming. I never thought I'd dread the sound of my own husband coming home, but here I was, tensing up at the jangle of keys in the lock. Ethan squirmed in my arms, sensing my anxiety. "Honey, I'm home," James called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I heard the thud of his briefcase hitting the floor, followed by the familiar hiss of a beer can opening. "In the nursery," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. I just finished changing Ethan and was about to put him down for a nap. Heavy footsteps approached, and James appeared in the doorway, beer in hand. His eyes raked over me, and I felt myself shrink under his gaze. "Still wearing those maternity clothes, huh?" he said, taking a swig. "You know, most women are back in shape by now." I bit my lip, fighting back tears. "James, it's only been 6 weeks. The doctor said." The doctor said, he mimicked. "I'm starting to think you're using that as an excuse. Maybe you just like being fat." The words stung, but I forced myself to take a deep breath. "Can we not do this in front of Ethan?" James rolled his eyes. "He's a baby. He doesn't understand anything." He peered at Ethan, his lip curling slightly. "Though I gotta say, he's not exactly a looker, is he? Must take after your side of the family." Something snapped inside me. "That's enough!" I hissed, careful not to raise my voice too much. "He's perfect, and if you can't see that, then maybe you need to take a good, that hard look at yourself." For a moment, James looked taken aback. Then his face hardened. "Watch your tone, Alicia. I'm the one bringing home the bacon around here. The least you could do is try to look good for me." I placed Ethan in his crib, my hands shaking with anger. "And what exactly have you done to help since we brought him home? Have you changed a single diaper? Gotten up for a night feeding? Hell, have you even picked up after yourself?" James' face flushed red. "That's woman's work. I didn't become a father to play housemaid." "No," I spat. "You became a father to criticize and belittle your wife and son. Well done, James. Father of the Year material right here." He took a menacing step towards me, and for a moment I thought he might hit me. Instead, he drained his beer and tossed the can on the floor. "Clean that up," he growled. "And while you're at it, maybe think about hitting the gym. I'm not asking for much, just for my wife to look like my wife again." With that, he stormed out, leaving me trembling in his wake. I heard the TV blare to life downstairs, some inane sports commentary filling the house. I sank to the floor, tears finally spilling over. How had it come to this? The man I married, the one who had held my hand through labor and promised to love me forever, where was he? A soft coo from the crib caught my attention. I looked up to see Ethan watching me, his tiny face a picture of innocence. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I stood up, wiping my eyes. "No more," I whispered to Ethan. "Mommy's done being a punching bag." I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. "Mom?" I said when she answered. "I need your help with something." As I outlined my plan to Barbara, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. James wanted the old Alicia back? Fine. But he'd soon learn that you should be careful what you wish for. "Are you sure about this, honey?" Mom asked, concern evident in her voice. I looked at Ethan, peacefully drifting off to sleep, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I replied. "It's time for a change. And James? He won't know what hit him." As I hung up, I heard James shouting from downstairs, demanding dinner. I squared my shoulders, a grim smile playing on my lips. Let him yell. His days of calling the shots were numbered. The game was changing, and I was about to become a player he never saw coming. The acrid smell of whiskey hit me before I even opened the front door. My stomach clenched, knowing what awaited me inside. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the storm. "James?" I called out, stepping into our dimly lit living room. Empty bottles littered the coffee table, and the TV blared some mindless reality show. A grunt from the couch was my only answer. I found James sprawled there, eyes glazed, another half-empty bottle dangling from his fingers. "You're home early," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Rough day at work?" He snorted, taking another swig. "What do you care? Too busy with your precious baby to give a damn about me." I bit back a retort. Engaging him when he was like this never ended well. "I'm going to check on Ethan," I said, turning towards the stairs. "Oh yeah, run to your little brat," James slurred, his words dripping with venom. "God knows he needs all the attention he can get. Might grow up to look halfway decent if you hover enough." I froze, my hand on the banister. "What did you just say?" James hauled himself up, swaying slightly. "You heard me. Kid's as ugly as sin. Guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, huh?" Something snapped inside me. All the pent-up anger, hurt, and frustration of the past months came rushing to the surface. "How dare you?" I hissed, advancing on him. "How dare you speak about our son that way?" He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Our son, please. I'm starting to wonder if he's even mine. Gus, maybe you've been fooling around, huh? Found someone who doesn't mind your fat ass? The slap echoed through the room before I even realized I'd raised my hand. James stumbled back, shock momentarily replacing the drunken haze in his eyes. You bitch, he snarled, rubbing his cheek. You'll pay for that. Fear gripped me as he lunged forward, but years of resentment gave me strength. I sidestepped his clumsy attack, sending him crashing into the coffee table. Enough! I shouted, my voice ringing with an authority I didn't know I possessed. I've had enough of your abuse, James. This ends now. He struggled to his feet, glass crunching under his shoes. You think you can stand up to me? You're nothing without me, Alicia. Nothing. A baby's cry pierced the air, snapping us both out of our rage. I turned and raced up the stairs, heart pounding. Behind me, I heard James stumbling after me, his curses following me like a toxic cloud. I burst into the nursery, scooping Ethan into my arms. Shh, baby, it's okay, I murmured, even as my own tears threatened to fall. Mommy's here. James appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of drunken fury. Put him down, he growled. This is between us. I clutched Ethan tighter, backing away. Stay back, James. I mean it. He took a menacing step forward. Or what? You'll slap me again? Go ahead. Give me a reason. In that moment, looking into the eyes of the man I once loved, now twisted by alcohol and hate, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Ethan, about giving him the life he deserved. No, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I won't give you anything. Not anymore. I reached for my phone with my free hand, never taking my eyes off James. I'm calling the police, I told him, and then I'm leaving, for good. Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or a moment of clarity. But it was quickly swallowed by rage. You wouldn't dare, he snarled. I met his gaze, unflinching. Watch me. As I dialed 911, a strange calm settled over me. This was it, the point of no return. But as I held Ethan close, feeling his tiny heart beating against mine, I knew I was making the right choice. The game had changed. And this time, I was playing for keeps. The gym locker room echoed with the sound of my labored breathing as I stared at my reflection in the mirror. 3 months had passed since that fateful night when I'd finally stood up to James. Now, here I was, drenched in sweat, my muscles aching, but a fire burning in my eyes that I hadn't seen in years. You're killing it, Alicia, Sarah, my personal trainer, said as she poked her head into the locker room. Same time tomorrow? I nodded, managing a smile. Wouldn't miss it for the world. As Sarah left, I allowed myself a moment of pride. The woman in the mirror was changing, not just physically, but mentally. The soft, pliable Alicia who'd let James walk all over her was fading away, replaced by someone stronger, fiercer. Back home, I found my mother, Barbara, playing with Ethan on the living room floor. She'd been my rock these past months, moving in to help with Ethan while I focused on rebuilding myself. How was the gym, sweetheart? She asked, scooping up Ethan as I bent to kiss his forehead. Brutal, I admitted, but in a good way. I feel alive. Barbara's eyes crinkled with a mixture of pride and concern. And James? Any word? I shook my head. After that night, James had moved out, alternating between begging for forgiveness and hurling threats. But I'd held firm, focusing on myself and Ethan. His lawyer called again, I said, sinking onto the couch. They're pushing for joint custody. Barbara's face hardened. Over my dead body. After what he did. I know, Mom, I interrupted gently, but the court doesn't see it that way, without concrete evidence of abuse. The words hung heavy in the air. We both knew what was at stake. If James got joint custody, all my efforts to protect Ethan could be undone. As if sensing the tension, Ethan began to fuss. I took him from Barbara, breathing in his sweet baby scent. It's okay, little man, I murmured. Mommy's got you. Later that night, after putting Ethan to bed, I sat at the kitchen table poring over legal documents. The custody battle loomed, a dark cloud on the horizon of my newfound strength. A text message lit up my phone. James. Miss me yet? You can't keep my son from me forever. I'll see you in court, bitch. My hands shook as I set the phone down. How dare he? After everything he'd done, he still thought he had the upper hand. In that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about getting back at James anymore. This was about protecting Ethan, about breaking the cycle of abuse before it could touch my son. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Alicia? It's late. Is everything okay? Detective Rodriguez, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Remember when you said to call if I ever wanted to press charges? I'm ready. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure about this, Alicia? Once we start, there's no going back. I looked at the baby monitor, watching Ethan's peaceful, sleeping face. Then my eyes drifted to the mirror in the hallway, catching my reflection. The woman staring back at me wasn't a victim anymore. She was a fighter. I'm sure, I said firmly. It's time James faced the consequences of his actions, and I'm going to make damn sure he never hurts us again. As I hung up, a mix of fear and determination coursed through me. The path ahead would be hard, but I was ready. James wanted a fight. He was about to get one he'd never see coming. The game had changed, and this time I was playing for keeps. For Ethan. For myself. And for every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't enough. Watch out, James. The new Alicia is coming for you, and she's not holding back. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing the woman staring back at me. 6 months of grueling workouts, strict dieting, and sheer determination had transformed my body. The soft, postpartum curves James had so cruelly mocked were replaced by lean muscle and renewed confidence. Alicia? Mom called from downstairs. James is here for his visitation with Ethan. My stomach clenched. Despite the restraining order, the court had granted James supervised visits. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my form-fitting workout clothes. Time to face the music. As I descended the stairs, I heard James's voice, thick with false charm. There's my big boy, come to Daddy. I rounded the corner to find James, looking disheveled and slightly bloated, awkwardly holding Ethan. His eyes widened as they landed on me, a flicker of something, shock, desire, crossing his face before he masked it with a sneer. Well, well, he drawled. Look who finally decided to take care of herself. I bit back a retort, focusing instead on Ethan. Hey, sweetie, Mommy's right here if you need me, okay? James scoffed. He doesn't need you hovering. Do you, champ? He bounced Ethan roughly, causing him to whimper. Careful, I snapped, instinctively reaching for my son. James pulled away, his eyes narrowing. Back off. It's my time with him. The tension in the room was palpable. Mom stepped in, ever the peacekeeper. Why don't we all sit down? I've made some snacks. As we moved to the living room, I couldn't help but notice James's labored breathing, the way his shirt strained against his expanding waistline. My secret weapon, weekly deliveries of high-calorie, irresistible treats to his apartment, was clearly working. James plopped onto the couch, immediately reaching for the plate of cookies. At least someone in this house knows how to treat a guest, he mumbled through a mouthful of crumbs. I perched on the edge of an armchair, watching him like a hawk as he interacted with Ethan. Despite his bravado, it was clear he had no idea how to handle a baby. So, James said, eyeing me over Ethan's head, you've been busy, huh? Trying to relive your glory days? I met his gaze steadily. I've been taking care of myself, something you might want to consider. His face flushed red. Watch it, Alicia. Don't forget who made you who you are. Oh, I haven't forgotten, I replied, my voice low and dangerous. I remember everything. The air crackled with unspoken threats. Ethan, sensing the tension, began to cry. James looked panicked, holding him at arm's length. Here, I said, standing up. Let me. I said back off, James snapped, jerking away. In his haste, he lost his grip on Ethan. Time seemed to slow down. I lunged forward, my heart in my throat, as Ethan slipped from James's grasp. By some miracle, I managed to catch him just before he hit the floor. Oh my God, Mom gasped, rushing to our side. I clutched Ethan to my chest, my whole body shaking. James stood frozen, his face ashen. I didn't mean to, he stammered. White-hot rage coursed through me. Get out, I hissed. Get out now. Alicia, please, it was an accident. An accident, I exploded. You could have seriously hurt him. This ends now, James. No more visits, no more chances. I'm calling my lawyer, and I'm going for full custody. James's face contorted with fury. You can't do that. He's my son, too. A son you just dropped, I shouted back. Leave, James, before I call the police. For a moment I thought he might lunge at me, but then, deflating like a punctured balloon, he turned and stomped out, slamming the door behind him. As the echo faded, I sank to the floor, still cradling Ethan. Mom knelt beside us, her hand on my shoulder. Are you okay, sweetheart? She asked softly. I looked down at Ethan, his tiny fingers curled around mine, his eyes wide with trust. In that moment, I knew there was no going back. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about protecting my child no matter the cost. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "But I will be. We both will be." As I held my son close, a steely resolve settled over me. James had no idea what was coming, but he was about to find out just how far a mother would go to protect her child. "Mommy, do I have to go?" Ethan's small voice quivered as I helped him into his coat. My heart clenched, but I forced a smile. "It's just for the weekend, sweetie. Remember what we talked about? Daddy misses you." 4 years had passed since that fateful day when James nearly dropped Ethan. Despite my best efforts, the court had recently granted James unsupervised weekend visits. The thought of Ethan alone with him made my stomach churn. A car horn blared outside. James, impatient as ever. "Come on, champ!" James called from the driveway, his voice overly cheerful. "We've got a big weekend planned." I walked Ethan out, my grip on his hand perhaps a little too tight. James stood by his car, a far cry from the fit man I'd married. Years of my special deliveries and his own neglect had taken their toll. He was easily 100 pounds heavier, his once chiseled face now puffy and red. "Hey, big guy!" James scooped Ethan up, grunting with the effort. "Ready for some man time?" Ethan nodded hesitantly, looking back at me. I swallowed hard, pushing down the urge to snatch him back. "Be good for Daddy, okay?" I said, kissing his forehead. Then, to James, my voice low and steely, "Remember, he has swimming lessons tomorrow at 10. Don't be late." James rolled his eyes. "Relax, Alicia. I've got this. Maybe if you weren't so busy at that gym of yours, you'd trust me more." I bit back a retort. My job at the fitness club had been a godsend, not just financially, but for my sanity. Plus, it gave me access to resources I needed for the next phase of my plan. As they drove away, I felt a familiar mix of anger and fear bubbling up. I needed to channel it, to stay focused. I headed to the gym, throwing myself into a punishing workout. Hours later, drenched in sweat and pleasantly sore, I checked my phone. No messages from James. I tried not to worry. He wouldn't dare mess this up, not when he was finally getting what he wanted. Sunday afternoon arrived with agonizing slowness. I paced the living room, checking the clock every few minutes. They were late. Very late. Just as I was about to call, I heard a car door slam. I rushed outside to find James struggling to get Ethan out of the car seat. "What happened?" I demanded, taking in Ethan's tear-stained face and James' disheveled appearance. "Nothing," James snapped. "Traffic was bad." But as Ethan ran to me, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A small angry bruise on his arm. "Ethan," I said, keeping my voice calm. "But how did you get this bruise?" Before he could answer, James cut in. "He fell at the park. Kids, you know. Always getting into scrapes." Ethan looked up at me, his eyes wide and fearful. In that moment, I knew James was lying. "Go inside, sweetie," I said softly. "Grandma's waiting with a surprise." As soon as Ethan was out of earshot, I rounded on James. "What really happened?" James's face darkened. "I told you he fell. Are you calling me a liar?" "Wouldn't be the first time," I shot back. "If I find out you laid a hand on him..." "You'll what?" James sneered, stepping closer. "Face it, Alicia. You've got nothing on me. The court sees what I want them to see, a loving father who deserves time with his son." For a moment I saw red. All the pain, all the humiliation he'd put me through over the years came rushing back. But then something shifted. A calm, cold determination settled over me. "You're right, James," I said, my voice steady. "The court sees what you want them to see. For now." His eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled, a predator's smile. "You'll find out soon enough. Enjoy your visitations while you can." As I turned to go inside, James called out, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "You can't take him from me, Alicia. He's my son, too." I paused at the door, looking back at the pathetic, bloated shell of the man I once loved. "Watch me," I said softly, and closed the door on his stunned face. Inside, I hugged Ethan close, my mind racing. The final phase of my plan was set. James had no idea what was coming, but he was about to learn a very painful lesson. The game was almost over, and I was holding all the cards. The quaint bell above the cafe door chimed as I stepped inside, my heart pounding beneath my carefully chosen outfit. James's parents, John and Kathy, looked up from behind the counter, their smiles faltering as they took in my transformed appearance. "Alicia," Kathy gasped, "is that really you?" I smiled, a predator's grin. In the flesh. Thanks for agreeing to this little family gathering. John's eyes narrowed. James said you had something important to discuss. He's on his way. As if on cue, the bell chimed again. James lumbered in, his face flushed from the short walk from the parking lot. He froze when he saw me, his jaw dropping comically. What the hell is this? He sputtered. I turned to face him, relishing the shock in his eyes. Hello, James. So glad you could join us. Kathy, ever the peacemaker, gestured to a table. Why don't we all sit down? I've prepared some refreshments. As we settled in, the tension was palpable. James couldn't take his eyes off me, a mix of desire and anger clouding his features. His parents exchanged worried glances. Where's Ethan? James demanded. Safe with my mother, I replied coolly. This conversation isn't for children's ears. John leaned forward. Alicia, what's going on? You said this was urgent. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. It is. I'm here to talk about James, about the kind of man your son really is. James's face darkened. Watch it, Alicia, he growled, but I was done being silenced. For years, I continued, my voice steady, James has been emotionally and verbally abusive. He's belittled me, mocked my appearance after giving birth to his child, and neglected his duties as a father. Kathy gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. John's brow furrowed in disbelief. That's ridiculous, James scoffed. Don't listen to her. She's clearly lost her mind. I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over the play button. Would you like to hear it for yourself? The color drained from James's face as I played the recordings. His cruel words, his drunken rants, the sound of objects being thrown, all preserved in damning clarity. My God, John whispered, his face ashen. Kathy reached for James's hand. Sweetheart, is this true? James jerked away, his eyes wild. She set me up. She's been planning this all along. I met his gaze, unflinching. You're right, James. I have been planning to free myself and our son from your toxicity. I turned to his parents, my voice softening. There's more. Last weekend, Ethan came home with bruises. James claims he fell, but... You bitch. James roared, lunging across the table. His meaty hands closed around my throat, knocking us both to the ground. For a moment, panic seized me. Then years of training kicked in. I brought my knee up sharply, connecting with his soft underbelly. As he wheezed, I twisted, breaking his grip and pinning him to the floor. That's enough! John's voice boomed as he and Kathy pulled us apart. I stood, straightening my clothes, my composure intact. James sprawled on the floor, red-faced and panting. I'm pressing charges, I said calmly, for assault and for what he did to Ethan. I have photographs, medical reports, everything. Kathy sobbed quietly, while John looked at his son with a mixture of disgust and disappointment. James, he said, his voice heavy, is this who you've become? James struggled to his feet, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. You can't do this, he wheezed. I'll lose everything. I met his gaze, years of pain and anger crystallizing into cold determination. You should have thought of that before you laid a hand on our son. As James crumpled, the fight finally leaving him, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle wasn't over. There would be court dates, custody hearings, and no doubt more of James's desperate attempts to maintain control. But standing there, surrounded by the wreckage of the life I'd once known, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The old Alicia was gone. In her place stood a warrior, a protector, a survivor, and God help anyone who tried to stand in my way. The courtroom fell silent as I approached the stand, my heels clicking against the polished floor. James sat at the defendant's table, a shadow of his former self, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw a flicker of the old arrogance there, quickly replaced by fear. Mrs. Henderson, the judge said, you may begin your testimony. I took a deep breath, my hand resting on the thick folder of evidence I'd compiled over the years. Your Honor, I'm here today not just as James Henderson's soon-to-be ex-wife, but as a survivor of years of emotional and physical abuse. For the next hour, I laid bare the ugly truth of my marriage, the cruel taunts about my postpartum body, the neglect of our son, the escalating aggression that culminated in Ethan's bruises. With each revelation, I felt lighter, as if shedding the weight of secrets I'd carried for too long. James's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, a scorned woman out for revenge. But the evidence spoke for itself, the recordings, the photographs, the medical reports. Even James's parents, sitting stiffly in the gallery, couldn't meet my eyes. As I finished my testimony, the judge leaned forward. Mrs. Henderson, given everything you've endured, what do you hope to achieve here today? I straightened my shoulders, my voice steady. Your Honor, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for justice and for protection. I want full custody of my son, and I want James to get the help he clearly needs. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. James's face contorted with rage, but a warning look from his lawyer silenced him. The judge nodded thoughtfully. And the divorce papers you've submitted? I allowed myself a small smile. Those are long overdue, Your Honor. As I returned to my seat, I caught sight of my mother in the audience, tears streaming down her face. She mouthed, I'm so proud of you, and I felt a surge of gratitude for her unwavering support. The rest of the proceedings passed in a blur. When the judge finally delivered her verdict granting me full custody and approving the divorce, I felt a curious mix of elation and exhaustion. James, his face ashen, was led away in handcuffs to await sentencing for child endangerment. As he passed me, he leaned in and hissed, This isn't over, Alicia. I met his gaze calmly. Yes, James, it is. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by a flurry of reporters, I spotted John and Kathy hovering uncertainly at the edge of the crowd. I made my way over to them, my heart heavy but resolute. Alicia, Kathy began, her voice trembling. We had no idea, all those years. John cut in, his face lined with shame. We failed you, and we failed our grandson. Can you ever forgive us? I took a deep breath, considering my words carefully. It's not about forgiveness right now. It's about moving forward. Ethan will need his grandparents in his life. If you're willing to be there for him, really be there, then we can work on rebuilding. They nodded eagerly, tears in their eyes. As they walked away, I felt a chapter of my life closing. My mother appeared at my side, wrapping an arm around me. Ready to go home, sweetheart? Home. The word held new meaning now. Not a battleground, not a prison, but a sanctuary for me and my son. More than ready, I replied, smiling. As we drove away, leaving the courthouse and the remnants of my old life behind, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Single motherhood, healing from trauma, rebuilding my life. But for the first time in years, I was excited for the future. The woman who had entered that courtroom was not the same one leaving it. I was stronger now, wiser, unbreakable. James had tried to diminish me, to break my spirit, but in the end, he'd only fueled my transformation. I thought of Ethan waiting for me at home and smiled. We had a whole new life ahead of us, full of love, laughter, and endless possibilities. The game was over, and this time we had both won. The little pink plus sign stared back at me, a beacon of hope and joy in the sterile bathroom light. I couldn't stop the smile from spreading across my face. After months of trying, Daniel and I were finally going to be parents. I clutched the pregnancy test to my chest, my heart racing with excitement. Daniel, I called out, rushing down the stairs. Daniel, I have amazing news. The living room was empty, but I could hear muffled voices coming from the kitchen. As I approached, Daniel's deep laugh mingled with a familiar, shrill cackle that made my stomach drop. No, it couldn't be. I rounded the corner to find my husband and his mother, Evelyn, sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by moving boxes. Miranda, there you are, Daniel said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Mom's here. Evelyn's perfectly coiffed silver hair gleamed as she turned to me. Her lips curled in what I'm sure she thought was a welcoming smile. Miranda, dear, how lovely to see you. I forced a smile, my hand instinctively moving to cover my still flat stomach. Evelyn, what a surprise. I didn't know you were visiting. Daniel cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. Actually, honey, Mom's not just visiting. She's moving in with us. The world tilted on its axis. What? I managed to choke out. Now, Miranda, Evelyn cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Daniel and I thought it would be best if I was here to help out. You're so busy with your little teaching job after all. I turned to Daniel, searching his face for any sign that this was all some cruel joke. When exactly were you planning on telling me about this? He at least had the decency to look sheepish. I was going to tell you tonight, sweetheart. It all happened so fast. Mom's lease was up, and well, we have the spare room. The nursery, I whispered, my hand tightening around the pregnancy test hidden behind my back. What was that, dear? Evelyn asked, her eyes narrowing. I straightened my spine, meeting her gaze. Nothing. Daniel, can I speak with you privately for a moment? We stepped into the hallway, and I could feel Evelyn's eyes boring into my back. Daniel, how could you make this decision without talking to me first? I hissed, trying to keep my voice low. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I once found endearing. Miranda, she's my mother. What was I supposed to do, let her be homeless? That's not the point, and you know it, I said, my frustration mounting. We're supposed to be partners. We make decisions like this together. I know. I'm sorry, he said, but his apology felt hollow. Look, it's just temporary, okay? Until she finds a new place. I wanted to argue further, to tell him about the baby growing inside me, but the words stuck in my throat. This should have been a moment of celebration, not conflict. Fine, I said, defeated, but we need to talk about this more later. As we re-entered the kitchen, Evelyn was unpacking a box, filling our cabinets with her gaudy china. Oh, Miranda, she said, not bothering to look at me. I hope you don't mind, but I've taken the liberty of rearranging things a bit. This kitchen could use a woman's touch. I bit my tongue, tasting blood. Actually, Evelyn, I'd prefer if you didn't. Nonsense, dear, she interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. You'll see, this will be so much better. Now, where do you keep your good silver? The set I saw earlier was rather quaint. I watched in horror as she systematically dismantled the kitchen I had so carefully organized. Daniel stood by, silent and useless, as his mother steamrolled over every protest I attempted to make. As the evening wore on, my joy at the pregnancy faded, replaced by a gnawing dread. How was I supposed to bring a child into this world when I couldn't even control what happened in my own home? Later that night, as I lay in bed next to a snoring Daniel, I placed a hand on my stomach and whispered a quiet promise. Don't worry, little one. Mommy will figure this out, somehow. The morning sickness hit me like a freight train, sending me rushing to the bathroom. As I knelt on the cold tile floor, heaving into the toilet, I heard Evelyn's voice outside the door. Miranda, dear, are you all right in there? I wiped my mouth, struggling to catch my breath. I'm fine, Evelyn. Just not feeling well. The door creaked open, and Evelyn's perfectly manicured hand appeared, holding a glass of water. Here, drink this. It'll settle your stomach. I accepted the water gratefully, but as I reached for it, my eyes caught sight of something on the vanity. My driver's license was peeking out from beneath Evelyn's makeup bag. What's my ID doing here? I asked, my voice hoarse. Evelyn's eyes widened for a split second before her face smoothed into a mask of innocence. Oh, I must have accidentally swept it up with my things when I was tidying earlier. Silly me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As Evelyn left, I quickly checked my wallet. My bank book was missing too. Later that day, I cornered Daniel in his home office. We need to talk about your mother, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He sighed, not looking up from his computer. What is it now, Miranda? I found my ID in her things, and my bank book is missing. Don't you think that's strange? Daniel finally met my gaze, his expression a mixture of exasperation and disbelief. Are you seriously accusing my mother of stealing? She's probably just trying to help organize things. By taking my personal documents? I countered, my frustration mounting. Miranda, you're being paranoid, he said dismissively. Mom's just trying to help. Maybe you misplaced your bank book. I opened my mouth to argue further, but a wave of nausea washed over me. I stumbled, catching myself on the edge of his desk. Daniel's face softened slightly. Are you okay? You've been sick a lot lately. This was my chance. I took a deep breath, ready to share the news of my pregnancy, but before I could speak, Evelyn's voice rang out from downstairs. Daniel, honey, can you come help me with something? He stood up immediately. We'll talk later, okay? Try to get some rest. As he left the room, I felt a tear slip down my cheek. How had my life become this? My husband more concerned with his mother's needs than his wife's well-being. That evening, I sat at the dinner table, pushing food around my plate, as Evelyn regaled us with stories of Daniel's childhood. And then little Daniel said, Mommy, when I grow up, I want to marry you. Evelyn cackled, reaching out to pinch Daniel's cheek. He laughed along with her, seemingly oblivious to my discomfort. I set down my fork, my appetite completely gone. If you'll excuse me, I murmured, standing up. But you've hardly touched your food, Evelyn said, her voice laced with false concern. Are you watching your figure, dear? You have been looking a bit puffy lately. I froze, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach. I'm just not feeling well, I managed to say. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of something poking out of Evelyn's purse on the counter. The corner of my bank book was just visible. My heart raced as I approached, casually reaching for a glass of water. In one swift motion, I snatched the bank book and slipped it into my pocket. "Miranda?" Daniel called. "What are you doing?" I turned, forcing a smile. "Just getting some water. I think I'll go lie down." As I climbed the stairs, I could hear Evelyn's voice, low and insistent. "Daniel, I'm worried about Miranda. She's been acting so strange lately. Do you think she might be unstable?" I clutched the railing, my knuckles turning white. This woman was trying to turn my husband against me, and worse, she was succeeding. In the safety of our bedroom, I opened the bank book with shaking hands. My blood ran cold as I saw unfamiliar transactions, large withdrawals I had never made. At that moment, I knew. This wasn't just about Evelyn moving in. This was war, and I was fighting for my marriage, my home, and the future of my unborn child. The smell of bacon wafted up the stairs, turning my stomach. I groaned, pushing myself out of bed. Another day in this house of horrors. As I made my way downstairs, I heard Daniel and Evelyn's voices in the kitchen. "Now, Daniel," Evelyn cooed, "a man needs a hearty breakfast. Miranda should be up making this for you." I paused at the bottom of the stairs, my blood boiling. "Mom, Miranda's been feeling under the weather lately," Daniel replied, his tone apologetic. "Nonsense," Evelyn scoffed. "In my day, we didn't let a little queasiness stop us from taking care of our husbands." I'd heard enough. I stormed into the kitchen, startling them both. "Good morning," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I see you're discussing my shortcomings as a wife." Daniel at least had the decency to look ashamed. Evelyn, however, merely raised an eyebrow. "Well, if the shoe fits, dear." I turned to Daniel, my patience wearing thin. "And what do you think about this, Daniel? Do you agree that I should be up at the crack of dawn, slaving over a hot stove for you?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "Miranda, you know that's not what we meant." "Oh, I think that's exactly what you meant," I snapped. "Well, let me make something clear. I am your wife, not your servant. And you," I turned to Evelyn, "are a guest in our home. It's about time you started acting like one." Evelyn's face turned an alarming shade of red. "How dare you speak to me like that? Daniel, are you going to let her talk to your mother this way?" Daniel looked between us, clearly torn. "Ladies, please, can't we all just get along?" I laughed bitterly. "Get along? Your mother has been undermining me since the moment she moved in, and you've done nothing but enable her." "Now, Miranda," Daniel started, his tone patronizing, "I think you're overreacting. Mom's just trying to help." "Help?" I exploded. "Is that what you call it? She's taken over our home, criticized everything I do, and now she's trying to turn you against me, and you're letting her." Daniel's face hardened. "That's enough, Miranda. I won't have you disrespecting my mother like this." I stared at him, shocked. "Your mother? What about your wife? What about our family?" "What family?" Evelyn interjected. "All I see is a woman who can't even take care of her husband properly." Something inside me snapped. "Oh, I'll show you family," I hissed, my hand moving to my stomach. "I'm pregnant, you insufferable witch." The kitchen fell silent. Daniel's jaw dropped and Evelyn's eyes narrowed to slits. "Pregnant?" Daniel stammered. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I've been trying to," I said, my voice breaking. "But you've been too busy catering to your mother's every whim to notice anything about me." Evelyn recovered quickly, her shock morphing into a saccharine smile. "Oh, how wonderful, Daniel. You're going to be a father. We must start preparing right away. Miranda, dear, you'll need to cut back on work. A mother's place is in the home, after all." I whirled on her. "No, absolutely not. I love my job and I'm not giving it up. But who will take care of the baby?" Evelyn pressed. "Surely you don't expect Daniel to change diapers and warm bottles?" I turned to my husband, praying he'd stand up for me, for us. "Daniel?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking conflicted. "Well, honey, Mom has a point. Someone needs to be home with the baby." In that moment, I saw my future flash before my eyes. Trapped in this house under Evelyn's thumb, with a husband who'd never stand up for me, I couldn't let that happen. "No," I said, my voice steady and cold. "If that's how you both feel, then things need to change. Now." I grabbed my car keys from the counter. I'm going to work. When I get back, we're going to have a serious conversation about the future of this family. All of us. As I walked out the door, I heard Evelyn's voice behind me. Daniel, we can't let her treat us this way. Something must be done. I slammed the door, my hands shaking. This was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was fighting back, and I wasn't going to lose. The weeks following my pregnancy announcement were a blur of tension and exhaustion. My morning sickness had intensified, leaving me drained and weak. Yet Evelyn's demands never ceased, and Daniel's indifference grew more pronounced with each passing day. One evening I stumbled into the kitchen, my head pounding and my stomach churning. The sight that greeted me made my blood boil. Evelyn was at the stove, stirring a pot of what smelled like her infamous beef stew. The very smell that had been making me nauseous for days. Evelyn, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I thought I asked you not to cook that. The smell makes me sick. She turned, her face a mask of innocence. Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I must have forgotten. Daniel mentioned he was craving it, and well, a good wife should cater to her husband's needs, don't you think? I gripped the counter, fighting back a wave of nausea. Where is Daniel? Working late again, poor dear. Evelyn cooed. He's been so stressed lately, I wonder why. The implication in her tone was clear. Before I could respond, a sharp pain shot through my abdomen. I gasped, doubling over. Evelyn's eyes widened in mock concern. Oh my, are you all right? Perhaps you should lie down. I'll take care of everything here. I wanted to argue, to stand my ground, but another wave of pain hit me. Defeated, I retreated to the bedroom. Hours later, I woke to raised voices downstairs. Groggy and disoriented, I made my way to the top of the stairs. Daniel, you need to talk some sense into that wife of yours, Evelyn was saying. She's not taking proper care of herself or this house. It's affecting you, I can tell. Mom, please, Daniel sighed. Miranda's pregnant. She's doing her best. Her best, Evelyn scoffed. When I was pregnant with you, I never let it interfere with my duties. That's what's wrong with women today, always making excuses. I'd heard enough. Swallowing my anger, I descended the stairs. Both of them fell silent as I entered the room. Miranda, Daniel started, his tone cautious. How are you feeling? Like I'm carrying your child while being treated like a burden in my own home, I snapped. How do you think I'm feeling? Evelyn clicked her tongue. Now, dear, there's no need for dramatics. We're all just concerned about you. I turned to her, my patience finally snapping. Concerned? You've done nothing but undermine and criticize me since you moved in. And you, I rounded on Daniel, have let her do it. I'm your wife, Daniel. We're having a baby. When are you going to start acting like it? Daniel's face hardened. That's enough, Miranda. Mom's right, you're being dramatic. Maybe if you tried a little harder. Tried harder? I interrupted, my voice rising. I'm growing a human being while working full-time and trying to keep this house running. What exactly would you like me to try harder at? Well, Evelyn interjected, for starters, you could. No, I held up a hand, silencing her. I don't want to hear another word from you. This is between me and my husband. Daniel stood, his face flushed with anger. Don't speak to my mother that way. She's only trying to help. Help, I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call this? Daniel, open your eyes. She's tearing us apart, and you're letting her. For a moment, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, but then Evelyn placed a hand on his arm, and his expression hardened once more. I think you need to calm down, he said coldly. Maybe you should go lie down. In that moment, something inside me broke. I looked at the man I had married, the father of my unborn child, and saw a stranger. You're right, I said, my voice eerily calm. I do need to lie down, but not here. I turned and walked out of the room, ignoring their calls behind me. As I climbed the stairs, my mind was made up. I couldn't stay in this house another night. It was time to take care of myself and my baby, even if it meant doing it alone. I stood in our bedroom, my hands shaking as I packed my suitcase. The weight of my decision pressed down on me, but I knew I had no choice. For the sake of my unborn child and my own sanity, I had to leave. As I zipped up the suitcase, the door creaked open. Daniel stood there, his face a mixture of confusion and anger. What are you doing? He demanded. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I'm leaving, Daniel. I can't stay here anymore. His eyes widened in disbelief. Leaving? But you're pregnant. You can't just leave. I can, and I will, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I'm taking my maternity leave early and going to stay with my parents. Daniel's face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous, Miranda. You're overreacting. Mom and I are just trying to help you. I laughed bitterly. Help me? Is that what you call this? Your mother has taken over our home, undermined me at every turn, and you've done nothing but enable her. She's just trying to prepare you for motherhood, Daniel argued. You should be grateful for her experience. Grateful? I spat. For what? For making me feel worthless in my own home? For stealing my personal documents? For turning my husband against me? Daniel's face paled. What are you talking about? Mom would never. Open your eyes, Daniel, I shouted, my frustration finally boiling over. She's manipulating you. Can't you see that? And you're letting her destroy our marriage. Just then, Evelyn appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of concern. What's all this shouting about? It can't be good for the baby. I turned to her, my anger reaching new heights. Don't you dare pretend to care about this baby. You've done nothing but stress me out since you moved in. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. I've only been trying to help. If you can't appreciate that, maybe you're not ready to be a mother. Her words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, my hand instinctively moving to protect my belly. Daniel stepped between us. Mom, that's enough. Miranda, you need to calm down. This stress isn't good for the baby. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. The man I married, the one who promised to stand by me through thick and thin, was gone. In his place stood a mama's boy who couldn't see past his mother's manipulations. I am calm, I said, my voice steady, and I'm leaving. I won't subject myself or my child to this toxic environment any longer. I grabbed my suitcase and pushed past them, heading for the stairs. Behind me I could hear Evelyn's voice dripping with false concern. Daniel, you can't let her leave. What will people think? A pregnant woman abandoning her home and husband. I whirled around, fury coursing through me. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm protecting myself and my child from you both. Daniel's face hardened. If you walk out that door, Miranda, don't expect to come back. His words hung in the air, a final ultimatum. I looked at him, searching for any sign of the man I fell in love with, but all I saw was Evelyn's puppet, dancing to her tune. Goodbye, Daniel, I said softly. I hope one day you'll see the truth. With that, I turned and walked out the front door. As I loaded my suitcase into the car, I could hear Evelyn's voice drifting from an open window. Let her go, Daniel. She'll come crawling back when she realizes she can't do this alone. I slammed the car door shut, my resolve strengthening. I'd show them both just how wrong they were. As I pulled out of the driveway, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely. My hand rested on my belly, and I whispered a promise to my unborn child. It's just you and me now, little one, but we're going to be okay. We're going to be more than okay. The contractions hit me like a freight train, jolting me awake in the middle of the night. I gasped, clutching my swollen belly as pain radiated through my body. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading and anticipating for months had finally arrived. Mom, I called out, my voice strained. Dad, it's time. My parents burst into the guest room, their faces a mixture of excitement and concern. As another contraction gripped me, I couldn't help but think of Daniel. He should be here, holding my hand, telling me everything would be okay. But he wasn't, and that absence felt like a physical ache. The ride to the hospital was a blur of pain and anxiety. Between contractions, I fumbled with my phone, staring at Daniel's number. Should I call him? Did he even deserve to know? My finger hovered over the call button, but another wave of pain made the decision for me. Hours passed in a haze of agony and determination. My mother's steady presence beside me was a comfort, but it wasn't enough to fill the void left by Daniel's absence. As the final pushes approached, I felt a surge of anger and resolve. I would do this on my own. I didn't need him or his overbearing mother. With one last earth-shattering push, my baby entered the world. The sound of her first cry filled the room, and suddenly nothing else mattered. It's a girl, the doctor announced, placing my daughter on my chest. I looked down at her tiny, perfect face, tears streaming down my cheeks. Hello, Lily, I whispered, the name I'd chosen months ago finally belonging to this beautiful, real person. As I held Lily, Marveling at her tiny fingers and button nose, a nurse approached with a clipboard. "Miss Thompson, we need some information for the birth certificate. Father's name?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I hesitated, my mind racing. Did Daniel deserve to be on the birth certificate? After everything that had happened, did he have the right to call himself Lily's father? Before I could answer, there was a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices echoed through the door, and my heart dropped as I recognized one of them. "I demand to see my daughter-in-law and grandchild." Evelyn's shrill voice carried into the room. "Ma'am, please calm down. Only immediate family is allowed at this time." A nurse tried to reason with her. "I am immediate family," Evelyn screeched. The door burst open, and there stood Evelyn, her face red with fury. Behind her, looking sheepish and conflicted, was Daniel. I instinctively tightened my hold on Lily, my body tensing. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice hoarse from hours of labor. Evelyn marched into the room, her eyes fixed on the bundle in my arms. "We're here to see our granddaughter, of course. Daniel, look at her. She has your nose." Daniel stepped forward, his eyes wide as he took in the sight of his daughter. "Miranda, I'm sorry. I should have been here." "You're right, you should have," I said, my voice cold. "But you weren't. You chose your mother over your wife and child." Evelyn scoffed. "Don't be so dramatic, Miranda. We're here now, and that's what matters. Now let me hold my granddaughter." She reached for Lily, and something inside me snapped. "Don't you dare touch her," I hissed, pulling Lily closer. The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. Daniel looked between me and his mother, clearly torn. "Miranda, please," he pleaded. "We just want to be a part of her life." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man I once loved. But I also saw the man who had let his mother come between us, who had chosen her over me time and time again. "I think you both need to leave," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "Now." Evelyn's face contorted with rage. "You can't keep us from her. We have rights." As she lunged forward, my mother stepped between us, her voice sharp. "That's enough. Get out, both of you, before I call security." As they were ushered out of the room, I looked down at Lily, peacefully oblivious to the drama surrounding her birth. In that moment, I made a decision that would change all our lives forever. "Nurse," I called out, my voice firm. "For the birth certificate. No father listed." 3 months after Lily's birth, I stood on the doorstep of what used to be my home, my heart pounding. Lily was nestled against my chest in her carrier, blissfully unaware of the storm we were about to enter. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Daniel opened the door, his eyes widening at the sight of us. "Miranda, you're back." "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. As we stepped inside, the familiar scent of Evelyn's perfume assaulted my senses. The house looked different, colder somehow. Evelyn emerged from the kitchen, her face a mask of false concern. "Oh, Miranda dear, you're looking well," she said, her eyes darting to Lily. "And this must be our little angel." I instinctively tightened my hold on Lily. "She's my daughter, Evelyn, not yours." Daniel cleared his throat. "Let's sit down and talk, shall we?" As we settled in the living room, I couldn't help but notice how out of place I felt in what was once my own home. Daniel sat across from me, while Evelyn hovered nearby, her eyes never leaving Lily. "I've come to collect my things," I said, cutting straight to the chase, "and to discuss our separation." Daniel's face fell. "Miranda, please. Can't we work this out, for Lily's sake?" Before I could respond, Evelyn interjected. "Now, Miranda, let's not be hasty. Family is everything, after all. And little Lily needs her father." I felt my anger rising. Lily has been doing just fine without a father who chose his mother over his wife and child. Daniel flinched at my words. "That's not fair, Miranda. I've been trying to reach out." "Trying?" I scoffed. "A few text messages asking to see Lily doesn't count as trying, Daniel." Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Now listen here, young lady. You can't keep that child from us. We have rights." "Rights?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "What about my rights? My right to feel safe and respected in my own home? My right to raise my daughter without your constant interference?" As if sensing the tension, Lily began to fuss. I stood up to soothe her, and that's when I saw it, my missing bank book peeking out from under a stack of papers on the side table. My blood ran cold. "What is that doing here?" Daniel followed my gaze, his face paling. "Miranda, I can explain." But I was already moving, snatching up the bank book. As I flipped through it, my worst fears were confirmed. Thousands of dollars, withdrawn without my knowledge or consent. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice shaking with rage and disbelief. Evelyn stepped forward, her face a picture of innocence. "Now, Miranda, don't jump to conclusions. We were just safeguarding your money." "Safeguarding," I exploded. "You stole from me. Both of you." Daniel stood, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Miranda, please, we can explain everything. We were just trying to—" "To what, Daniel?" I spat. "To control me? To keep me dependent on you?" Evelyn's facade finally cracked. "You ungrateful little—" "That's enough," a new voice boomed from the doorway. We all turned to see Douglas, Daniel's father, standing there, his face a mask of fury. "Dad?" Daniel said, shocked. "What are you doing here?" Douglas strode into the room, his eyes blazing. "I came to see my granddaughter, but it seems I've walked into a crime scene instead." He turned to me, his voice softening. "Miranda, I am so sorry. I had no idea things had gotten this bad." As Douglas's words hung in the air, I felt a strange mix of vindication and despair. The truth was finally out, but at what cost? I looked at Daniel, the man I once loved, now a stranger to me. At Evelyn, her mask of benevolence finally shattered, and at Douglas, an unexpected ally in this mess. With Lily clutched tightly to my chest, I made a decision that would change all our lives forever. "I'm calling the police," I said, my voice steady and resolved. "This ends now." The room fell silent as I dialed 911, my hands shaking but my voice steady. Lily, sensing the tension, began to whimper. I bounced her gently, my eyes never leaving Daniel and Evelyn. "Miranda, please," Daniel pleaded, his face ashen. "We can work this out." But it was too late. Years of manipulation, gaslighting, and theft had led to this moment. As I reported the crime to the dispatcher, I watched the reality of the situation dawn on Daniel's face. The police arrived within minutes, their presence filling our once shared home. As they questioned us, the full extent of Evelyn's deceit came to light. Not only had she stolen my bank book and ID, but she had been systematically draining our accounts for months. Daniel's shock seemed genuine, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for him. He had chosen his mother over me, over our family, time and time again. As the officers led Evelyn away in handcuffs, she turned to Daniel, her face a mask of desperation. "Daniel, darling, you can't let them do this to your mother." I watched, holding my breath, as Daniel stood frozen, torn between the woman who raised him and the family he had helped create. In that moment, I saw the boy he once was, desperate for his mother's approval, and the man he had failed to become. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, turning away from her. Evelyn's shrieks echoed through the house as she was escorted out, leaving an eerie silence in her wake. Douglas stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Miranda, I can't begin to express how sorry I am for all of this. I should have seen what was happening, should have stopped it." I nodded, grateful for his support, but too emotionally drained to speak. As the chaos subsided, I found myself alone with Daniel in what was once our bedroom. He sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "I've ruined everything, haven't I?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt a strange mix of pity and resolve. "Yes, Daniel, you have. But not just today. This has been happening for years." He raised his head, his eyes red-rimmed. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought I was protecting our family." "No," I said firmly. "You were protecting your mother, at the expense of your wife and child. And now it's time for me to protect Lily and myself." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to say next. "I want a divorce, Daniel, and full custody of Lily." His shoulders slumped, but he didn't argue. "I understand," he said softly. I'll give you whatever you need." As I packed the last of my things, Douglas approached me again. "Miranda, I know I have no right to ask this, but please don't cut us out of Lily's life entirely. She deserves to know her family, flaws and all." I looked at this man, who had remained silent for so long but had finally found his voice when it mattered most. "We'll see, Douglas. For now, I need time and space to heal." With Lily secured in her car seat and my belongings packed, I stood at the threshold of what was once my home. Daniel and Douglas watched as I prepared to leave, the weight of everything that had transpired hanging heavy in the air. "Goodbye," I said simply, closing the door on that chapter of my life. As I drove away, Lily cooed softly in the back seat. I caught her eye in the rearview mirror and felt a surge of love and determination. "It's just you and me now, little one," I said, my voice strong and clear, "but we're going to be okay. More than okay." The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt free. Free from manipulation, free from doubt, free to be the mother and woman I was meant to be. As the sun set on this tumultuous day, I realized that sometimes the happiest endings come from the courage to write your own story, and that's exactly what Lily and I were going to do. The letter trembled in my hands, its crisp edges suddenly feeling like razor blades against my skin. I read the words again, hoping they'd somehow rearrange themselves into something less devastating. They didn't. "Richard, my love," it began. My husband's name, followed by an endearment that wasn't mine to give. I sank onto the edge of our bed, the same bed where Richard and I had made love, shared dreams, and created our beautiful daughter, Lily. Now it felt tainted, as if the secrets hidden within its folds were seeping out to suffocate me. A knock at the door jolted me from my spiral. "Mom?" Lily's voice called out. "Are you okay?" I hastily shoved the letter under a pillow and tried to compose myself. "Come in, sweetie," I managed, forcing a smile as she entered. Lily, all gangly limbs and curious eyes at 14, hesitated in the doorway. "Dad said he's working late again tonight. Can we order pizza?" The mention of Richard sent a fresh wave of nausea through me, but I nodded. "Sure, honey. Why don't you go ahead and call? Get whatever toppings you want." As Lily bounced away, phone already in hand, I retrieved the letter. My fingers itched to tear it to shreds, to burn it and pretend I'd never seen it. But I couldn't. This was evidence, proof of the growing chasm in my marriage that I'd been trying so hard to ignore. I made my way downstairs, letter tucked safely in my pocket. In the kitchen, Lily was chattering away about her day, but her words barely registered. My mind was a whirlwind of questions and accusations. "Mom?" Lily's voice cut through my thoughts. "You're not listening." I blinked, focusing on her concerned face. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I've got a lot on my mind. What were you saying?" She sighed dramatically, in that way only teenagers can. "I was asking if we could invite Grandma over this weekend. Dad's going to be out of town again, and I thought it might be fun. My mother, Grace." The thought of her steady presence was suddenly overwhelmingly appealing. "That's a great idea, Lily. Why don't you give her a call after we eat?" As if on cue, the doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of our dinner. We settled at the table, the normalcy of our routine a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. "So where's Dad going this time?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Lily shrugged, mouthful of pizza. "Dunno, some conference thing, I think. He was being all weird about it when I asked." My heart clenched. How long had this been going on? How many conferences had really been rendezvous with his mistress? "Mom?" Lily's voice was small now. "Is everything okay with you and Dad?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the worry etched in her young face. She was perceptive, my girl. Too perceptive sometimes. "We're just going through a rough patch, sweetie," I said, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "But don't worry. We'll figure it out." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to shatter her world. Not yet. After dinner, as Lily chattered away on the phone with her grandmother, I retreated to my home office. The letter felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. I pulled it out, smoothing the creases, and began to read it again, this time looking for clues. The sound of the front door opening made me jump. Richard's voice called out, "I'm home!" Panic surged through me. I wasn't ready to face him, wasn't prepared for the confrontation that was inevitably coming. But as his footsteps approached my office, I knew I had no choice. The door swung open, and there he stood, my husband of 16 years, the father of my child, the man I thought I knew better than anyone in the world. "Sophia," he said, his brow furrowing as he took in my expression. "What's wrong?" I held up the letter, watching as recognition and then fear flashed across his face. "We need to talk, Richard," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Right now." Richard's face drained of color as he stared at the letter in my hand. "Sophia, I can explain," he stammered, but I cut him off with a sharp laugh. "Explain? How exactly do you plan to explain this, Richard?" I waved the letter in front of him. "How long has this been going on?" He closed the office door behind him, his eyes darting nervously. "It's not what you think. It's complicated." "Complicated? I spat the word back at him. What's complicated about betraying your wife and family? Richard ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. Now it just made my stomach churn. I never meant for this to happen. It just did. I stood up, anger coursing through me. Things don't just happen, Richard. You made choices that affect all of us. A soft knock on the door interrupted us. Mom? Dad? Is everything okay? Lily's voice was muffled but concerned. Richard and I exchanged a panicked look. Everything's fine, sweetie, I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Just grown-up stuff. Why don't you go finish your homework? We waited in tense silence until we heard Lily's footsteps retreat. Then Richard slumped into a chair, looking defeated. What do you want me to say, Sophia? That I'm sorry? Because I am. God, I am. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. Instead, I took a deep breath. I want you to tell me the truth. All of it. And so for the next hour, Richard talked. He told me about meeting her at a conference 2 years ago, about how it started as harmless flirting and spiraled into something more. He spoke of guilt and temptation, of feeling trapped and alive at the same time. With each word, I felt our marriage crumbling around me. 16 years of love, trust, and shared dreams, all reduced to ashes by his selfish choices. What about Lily? I asked when he finally fell silent. Did you ever think about what this would do to her? Richard's face crumpled. Of course I did. That's why I tried to end it several times, but it was never that simple. A horrible thought struck me. Does Lily know? Have you said anything to her? He shook his head vehemently. No, never. I wouldn't put that on her. But something in his eyes made me doubt him. I made a mental note to check Lily's phone, just in case. The thought of involving our daughter in this mess made me sick. So what happens now? I asked, suddenly feeling exhausted. Richard reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I want to make this right, Sophia. I love you. I love our family. I'll do whatever it takes. I looked at him, this man I thought I knew so well, and felt nothing but a hollow ache. I don't know if there's anything you can do to make this right, Richard. I don't even know if I want you to try. His face fell, but before he could respond, we heard a crash from upstairs, followed by Lily's panicked cry. Mom! Dad! We raced up the stairs, momentarily united in our concern for our daughter. We found Lily in the bathroom, pale and shaking, surrounded by shattered glass from a fallen mirror. I don't feel good, she mumbled, swaying on her feet. I caught her just as her knees buckled. As I cradled Lily in my arms, feeling her forehead burning with fever, I glared at Richard over her head. Call an ambulance, I ordered. He hesitated, glancing at his watch. I have an early flight tomorrow. Maybe we should just call the ambulance. My voice was ice cold. In that moment, I saw Richard for who he truly was, a selfish, unreliable man who put his own needs above his family's. As sirens wailed in the distance, I held Lily close, whispering soothing words. My mind raced with worry for my daughter and fury at my husband. One thing was clear. Our lives would never be the same after tonight. The hospital waiting room felt like a prison cell, its sterile walls closing in on me as I waited for news about Lily. Richard had left hours ago, citing his important business trip as an excuse. His absence spoke volumes about where his priorities truly lay. I clutched my phone, debating whether to call my mother, Grace. She'd know what to do, how to handle this mess. But telling her meant making it real, admitting that my perfect little family was falling apart. A doctor approached, his face unreadable. Mrs. Thompson? Your daughter is stable, but we need to run more tests. It appears to be a severe case of pneumonia. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a new wave of worry. Can I see her? He nodded, leading me to Lily's room. She looked so small and fragile in the hospital bed, hooked up to various machines. Her eyes fluttered open as I entered. Mom? Her voice was barely a whisper. I rushed to her side, taking her hand. I'm here, sweetheart. You're going to be okay. Lily's eyes darted around the room. Where's Dad? The question felt like a knife to my heart. He had to go on his trip, honey, but he'll be back soon. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. Lily's face fell, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. He always leaves when I need him, she mumbled. I stroked her hair, fighting back my own tears. I know, baby. I know. As Lily drifted off to sleep, I stepped out into the hallway and finally made the call I'd been dreading. Mom, it's me. I need you. Grace arrived within the hour, her familiar perfume enveloping me as she pulled me into a tight hug. "Oh, Sophia, what's happened?" I broke down then, telling her everything: Richard's affair, Lily's illness, his abandonment. Grace listened without judgment, her hand steady on my back. "That bastard," she muttered when I finished. "I always knew he wasn't good enough for you." Despite everything, I found myself defending him. "He's Lily's father, Mom. He's not all bad." Grace's eyes narrowed. "A good father doesn't abandon his sick child for a business trip, or cheat on his wife for that matter." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "How's Lily? Sorry I had to leave. This deal could mean big things for us." Anger surged through me. I showed the message to Grace, who scoffed. "Big things? Like a divorce?" The word hung in the air between us. Divorce. Was that where this was heading? A nurse interrupted our tense silence. "Mrs. Thompson, your daughter is asking for you." I hurried back to Lily's room, Grace close behind. Lily was sitting up, looking slightly better, but still pale. "Grandma," she exclaimed weakly, managing a small smile. Grace moved to Lily's bedside, fussing over her. "Oh, my sweet girl, you gave us quite a scare." As they chatted, I noticed Lily's phone on the bedside table. A notification flashed across the screen. A message from Richard. My heart raced as I remembered his hesitation when I asked if Lily knew about the affair. Without thinking, I grabbed the phone, ignoring Lily's confused, "Mom?" I opened the message thread, my hands shaking. What I saw made my blood run cold. "Remember, Lily, not a word to your mother about what you saw. It would break her heart." I looked up, meeting Lily's wide, fearful eyes. She knew. She had known all along. "Sophia?" Grace's voice was concerned. "What is it?" I turned the phone screen towards them, watching as understanding dawned on their faces. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Not only had Richard cheated, but he had burdened our daughter with his secret, threatening her into silence. In that moment, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about protecting Lily from her own father's selfishness. "Mom," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me, "I think I'm going to need a good lawyer." The hospital discharged Lily after 3 days. Her condition improved, but still fragile. As we settled back into our home, the weight of recent revelations hung heavy in the air. Richard hadn't returned from his business trip, and I was grateful for the reprieve. I needed time to think, to plan. Grace had insisted on staying with us, her presence a comforting buffer between Lily and the turmoil threatening to engulf our family. As I tucked Lily into bed that night, her eyes met mine, brimming with unspoken questions. "Mom," she began hesitantly, "about Dad's messages." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "It's okay, sweetheart. You can tell me anything." Lily's words tumbled out in a rush, detailing how she'd accidentally discovered Richard's affair months ago, how he'd caught her looking at his phone and made her promise to keep quiet. The guilt and fear in her voice broke my heart. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she sobbed. "I wanted to tell you, but Dad said it would destroy our family." I pulled her close, my own tears falling. "Oh, Lily, none of this is your fault. Your father had no right to put that burden on you." As Lily drifted off to sleep, exhausted by her confession, I slipped out of her room, my mind racing. I needed to see those messages for myself, to understand the full extent of Richard's betrayal. With trembling hands, I picked up Lily's phone from her nightstand. The passcode, her birthday, granted me access to a world I wasn't prepared for. The messages from Richard were worse than I'd imagined, manipulative, threatening, even cruel at times. He'd used our daughter's love and loyalty against her, against us both. "Remember, this is our little secret. Mom doesn't need to know. If you say anything, it'll break up our family." "Is that what you want? You liked talking to your mother earlier. You didn't tell her anything, did you?" Each message felt like a physical blow. How could the man I'd loved for so long be capable of such callousness? But it wasn't just Richard's messages that caught my attention. There were others, from names I didn't recognize, with content that made my blood run cold. "Hey, Lily, got any more of those pills? My buddy's looking to buy. Your dad hooked us up last time. Can you ask him for more?" My hands shook as I scrolled through message after message. The pieces started falling into place. Richard's frequent business trips, the unexplained cash I'd found hidden in his desk, his increasingly erratic behavior. This wasn't just an affair. Richard was involved in something far more dangerous, and he dragged our daughter into it. A noise from downstairs startled me. I quickly replaced Lily's phone and crept to the top of the stairs. Richard's voice drifted up, low and angry as he argued with someone on his own phone. "I told you, I'll have the money soon, just give me a few more days. No, you can't come here. My family doesn't know anything about this." I retreated to my bedroom, my mind reeling. The man downstairs was a stranger to me now, a liar, a cheater, and possibly a criminal. And he'd used our daughter as a pawn in whatever game he was playing. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. It was about protecting Lily. It's about reclaiming our lives from the web of lies Richard had spun around us. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over the keypad. One call could change everything. To the police? A lawyer? My finger trembled as I made my choice and pressed dial. A sleepy voice answered on the third ring. "Sophia? What's wrong?" "Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need your help. It's time to take action against Richard, and I think we might need to involve the authorities." As I spoke, I heard Richard's footsteps on the stairs. Time was running out. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. I would do whatever it took to protect my daughter and uncover the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. I ended the call with my mother just as Richard's footsteps reached our bedroom door. My heart raced, but I steeled myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. When he entered, his eyes bloodshot and tie askew, I barely recognized the man I had married. "Sophia," he slurred, "why are you still up?" I stood, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk, Richard, now." He stumbled towards me, reaching out, but I stepped back. "What's going on?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "I know everything," I said, my words cutting through the tension. "The affair, the threats to Lily, and whatever illegal business you're mixed up in." Richard's face paled, then twisted with anger. "You've been snooping through my things?" "I didn't have to," I retorted. "You left a trail a mile wide. How could you involve our daughter in this?" He advanced on me, his eyes flashing dangerously. "You don't understand. I had no choice. We needed the money." "Money?" I interrupted, incredulous. "What about our family? What about Lily's safety?" Richard's demeanor suddenly changed, his voice taking on a pleading tone. "I can explain everything, Sophia. Just give me a chance." But I was done listening to his lies. "No, Richard, I've given you chances. I've given you years. It's over." His face contorted with rage. "You can't do this to me. You have no idea what you're dealing with." As he lunged towards me, I stumbled backwards, knocking over a lamp. The crash echoed through the house, followed by the sound of running footsteps. Lily appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with fear. "Mom? Dad? What's happening?" Richard froze, the anger draining from his face. "Lily, sweetie, go back to bed. Everything's fine." But Lily stood her ground, her gaze shifting between us. "No, it's not fine. I heard you yelling. I saw the messages, Dad. I know what you've been doing." The room fell silent, the weight of Lily's words hanging in the air. Richard's shoulders slumped in defeat. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he mumbled. I moved to stand beside Lily, placing a protective arm around her shoulders. "It's too late for excuses, Richard. We're leaving. Tonight." His head snapped up, panic clear in his eyes. "You can't leave. It's not safe. The people I'm involved with are exactly why we need to go," I finished for him. "We're not part of whatever mess you've created." As if on cue, Grace appeared behind Lily, car keys in hand. "The bags are in the car," she said, her voice firm. "Let's go, girls." Richard made one last desperate attempt. "Sophia, please. If you leave now, I'll lose everything." I met his gaze, feeling a mixture of pity and resolve. "You already have, Richard. You lost us the moment you chose your secrets over your family." With that, I guided Lily out of the room, Grace following close behind. As we descended the stairs, I heard Richard's broken sobs echoing through the house we once called home. Outside, the cool night air hit my face, bringing with it a sense of both fear and freedom. As we climbed into Grace's car, Lily's small voice broke the silence. "Mom, where are we going?" I turned to look at my daughter, seeing the trust and uncertainty in her eyes. In that moment, I made a decision that would shape our future. "Somewhere safe, sweetheart. Somewhere we can start over." As Grace pulled away from the curb, I watched our house disappear in the rearview mirror. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with potential dangers from Richard's mysterious associates. But one thing was clear. There was no going back. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, free from the web of lies that had entangled us for too long. With a deep breath, I turned to face forward, ready to embrace whatever the future held for us. The address on the crumpled paper felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket as I stood outside the nondescript apartment building. My heart raced, but I steeled myself. This was it. The moment I'd confront Richard's mistress and unravel the last threads of his web of lies. I'd left Lily with Grace, telling them I needed to run some errands. They didn't need to know the risks I was taking. As I climbed the stairs, my mind flashed back to the conversation I'd overheard between Richard and his mysterious associates. Whatever he was involved in, it was dangerous, and I needed answers. I knocked on the door, my knuckles white with tension. A moment later, it swung open, revealing a woman I recognized from a photo on Richard's phone. She was younger than me, beautiful in a way that made my stomach churn with insecurity. "Can I help you?" she asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Are you Amanda?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Her eyes widened in recognition. "You're Sophia, aren't you? Richard's wife." I nodded, pushing past her into the apartment. "We need to talk." Amanda closed the door, her face a mix of guilt and defiance. "Look, I know what you must think of me." "I'm not here to judge you," I interrupted. "I'm here for the truth. About Richard, about whatever illegal business he's mixed up in, all of it." She paled, sinking onto the couch. "How much do you know?" "Enough to know that my family is in danger," I said, my voice hard. "Richard's been threatening our daughter to keep quiet, and now there are people after him, after us." Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "I never meant for any of this to happen. Richard told me he was separated, that you knew about us. By the time I realized the truth, I was in too deep." "What do you mean, too deep?" I pressed. She took a shaky breath. "Richard, he's not who you think he is. The business trips, the late nights, it was all a cover. He's been moving drugs, laundering money. I didn't know at first, but when I found out..." "He threatened you too," I finished, the pieces falling into place. Amanda nodded, wiping away tears. "He said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I went down with him, but that's not the worst of it." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean? The people he's working for, they're dangerous. They think Richard's been skimming money, they're looking for him, and they don't care who gets hurt in the process." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We know where you are. Where's Richard? You have 24 hours. I showed Amanda the message, watching the color drain from her face. "They must have followed you here," she whispered. Panic clawed at my throat. "Lily? Grace." They were alone, unprotected. "I have to go," I said, rushing towards the door. Amanda grabbed my arm. "Wait, there's something else you need to know. Richard, he's been using Lily to make some of his deliveries. She probably didn't even know what she was carrying." The world tilted on its axis. My daughter, my baby girl, unknowingly caught up in her father's criminal activities. Rage and fear battled within me. "I'm so sorry," Amanda said, her voice breaking. "I should have told someone sooner." I turned to her, my mind racing. "It's not too late. We can still fix this, but I need your help. Will you testify against Richard?" She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, it's time to end this." As we hurried out of the apartment, my phone buzzed again. Another message. "Tick-tock, Sophia. The clock is running." With Amanda by my side, I raced towards my car. We had 24 hours to find Richard, protect my family, and bring down whatever criminal enterprise he'd entangled us in. It seemed impossible, but I had no choice. Everything I loved was at stake. As I started the engine, I made a silent vow. No matter what it took, I would keep Lily safe and put an end to this nightmare once and for all. The final confrontation was coming, and I had to be ready. The clock was ticking as Amanda and I raced back to my mother's house. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every second felt like an eternity, knowing Lily and Grace were in danger. "We need to call the police," Amanda said, her voice trembling. I shook my head. "Not yet. If we do, Richard might run, or worse, those criminals might hurt my family. We need to find him first." As we pulled up to the house, I saw Richard's car parked haphazardly in the driveway. My heart leaped into my throat. He was here. "Stay in the car," I ordered Amanda. "If anything happens, call 911. I burst through the front door. adrenaline coursing through my veins. The scene that greeted me was chaos. Richard stood in the living room, wild-eyed and desperate, facing off against my mother, who stood protectively in front of Lily. "Richard," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "It's over. Step away from them." He whirled to face me, his expression a mix of anger and fear. "Sophia, where have you been? They're coming for us. We need to leave now." "No, Richard," I replied, moving slowly towards Lily and Grace. "You need to turn yourself in. It's the only way to keep our family safe." His face contorted with rage. "You don't understand. I did all of this for us, for our future." "By putting our daughter in danger?" I shot back. "By using her as a drug mule?" Lily gasped, her eyes wide with shock. "Dad, is that true?" Richard's anger crumbled, replaced by shame. "Lily, I never meant for you to get involved. I thought I could protect you." "Protect her?" Grace interjected, her voice sharp. "You've done nothing but endanger her and this entire family." As if on cue, the sound of screeching tires filled the air. Through the window, I saw 2 black SUVs pull up, men in dark clothing pouring out. "They're here," Richard whispered, panic etched on his face. In that moment, everything seemed to move in slow motion. I grabbed Lily and pushed her towards the back door. "Mom, take Lily and run! Now!" Grace didn't hesitate, ushering Lily out as the front door burst open. 3 men entered, their eyes cold and calculating. Well, the leader sneered, his gaze fixed on Richard. "Thought you could hide from us, did you?" Richard stumbled backward, his bravado evaporating. "I can explain. I have your money. Just give me more time." The man laughed, a chilling sound. "Time's up, Richard. And look, you've brought your whole family into this mess. How thoughtful." I stepped forward, placing myself between the men and Richard. "This ends now. You want your money? Fine, but you leave my family out of this." The leader raised an eyebrow, amused. "And who might you be?" "I'm the woman who's about to bring your whole operation down," I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. I pulled out my phone, showing them the screen. "I've been recording everything. One press of this button, and it all goes to the police." The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. I could feel Richard's eyes boring into me, a mix of fear and awe on his face. The leader's amusement faded, replaced by cold calculation. "You're bluffing." "Try me," I challenged. "I have nothing left to lose. But you have everything to lose." As we stood in this tense standoff, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Amanda must have called the police after all. The leader's eyes darted between me, Richard, and the window. I could see the wheels turning in his head, weighing his options. In that moment, with the police approaching and criminals at my doorstep, I realized the true strength within me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore, but for Lily, for our future. Whatever happened next, I knew I had the courage to face it head on. The leader made his decision, reaching slowly into his jacket. My breath caught in my throat as I waited to see what he would pull out. A gun or a white flag. The fate of my family hung in the balance, and I steeled myself for whatever came next. The leader's hand emerged from his jacket, not with a gun but a flash drive. "This contains everything," he said, his voice tight. "All of Richard's dealings, our operation, everything. It's yours." As sirens wailed closer, the men retreated, leaving us in stunned silence. Richard collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. "Sophia, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I felt nothing but cold determination as I looked at the man I once loved. "Save it, Richard. It's over." The next few hours passed in a blur of police statements and tearful reunions with Lily and Grace. Amanda's testimony, combined with the evidence on the flash drive, was enough to bring down Richard and the entire drug operation. As dawn broke, I sat on the porch of my mother's house, exhausted but relieved. Grace joined me, wrapping a comforting arm around my shoulders. "You did it, sweetheart," she said softly. "You protected your family." I leaned into her embrace, finally allowing myself to feel the weight of everything that had happened. "I just wish I had seen it sooner, Mom. I feel like I failed Lily." Grace shook her head firmly. "You didn't fail anyone, Sophia. You showed incredible strength and courage. Lily is lucky to have you as her mother." As if summoned by our conversation, Lily appeared in the doorway, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. "Mom, can I join you?" I opened my arms and she rushed into them, burying her face in my shoulder. "I'm so proud of you, baby," I whispered, stroking her hair. Lily pulled back, her expression serious. What happens now? With Dad, I mean. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Your father made some very bad choices, Lily. He's going to have to face the consequences of those choices. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. She nodded, her eyes welling with tears. And us? What happens to us? I squeezed her hand, including Grace in my gaze. We start over, together. It won't be easy, but we have each other, and that's what matters most. As the sun rose higher, casting a warm glow over the yard, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, I felt hope. Weeks turned into months, and slowly we began to rebuild our lives. I threw myself into my teaching, finding renewed passion in empowering young minds. Lily, with the help of therapy and our unwavering support, began to heal from the trauma of her father's betrayal. Richard, true to form, tried to reconcile once the dust had settled. He called, sent letters, even showed up at the house once, but each time I stood firm in my resolve. We're done, Richard, I told him during his last attempt. I've forgiven you for my own peace, but there's no going back. Lily and I deserve better. As I closed the door on him for the last time, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We were free. One evening, as Lily and I sat on the porch swing, she turned to me with a smile that reminded me so much of her younger self. Mom, I've been thinking. I want to volunteer at the women's shelter downtown. After everything we've been through, I want to help other families who might be struggling. Pride swelled in my chest. That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart. We can look into it together. As we sat there, planning for the future, I marveled at how far we'd come. The pain and betrayal we'd endured had forged us into stronger, more compassionate versions of ourselves. I looked at my daughter, this remarkable young woman who had faced unimaginable challenges with grace and resilience, and I knew that whatever life threw our way, we would face it together. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. As darkness fell, I felt not fear, but anticipation for the dawn to come. Our story wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, we were writing it on our own terms. The room spun like a carnival ride gone wrong. I clutched the kitchen counter, my knuckles white as the familiar dizziness threatened to overwhelm me. Not again, not now. Scott? I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. Silence. Then, heavy footsteps from upstairs. My husband appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of irritation rather than concern. What is it now, Lena? He sighed, not moving to help me. I swallowed hard, fighting the nausea. I think I'm going to faint. Can you just help me to the couch? Scott rolled his eyes, but crossed the room, roughly grabbing my arm. This is getting old, you know. Have you even been to the doctor like I told you to? As he half-dragged me to the living room, I bit back a retort. Of course I had been to the doctor, multiple times, but no one could figure out what was wrong with me. The dizziness, the fatigue, the unexplained pain, it was all a mystery. He dumped me unceremoniously onto the couch and stood there, arms crossed. I have a meeting in an hour. Are you going to be okay? Or do I need to cancel? I looked up at him, searching for any hint of the man I'd married 10 years ago. The Scott who would have dropped everything to take care of me. The Scott who loved me. I'll be fine, I lied, closing my eyes against another wave of dizziness. Go to your meeting. Great, he said, already turning away. There's leftover pizza in the fridge if you get hungry later. As the front door slammed behind him, I let out a shaky breath. When had things gotten so bad between us? I thought back to our early days. The romantic gestures, the laughter, the way he'd look at me like I was the only woman in the world. Now, I was lucky if he looked at me at all. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. With shaking hands, I reached for it, hoping it wasn't work calling to ask why I hadn't shown up yet. It was a text from my father-in-law, Frank. Hey, sweetie, just checking in. How are you feeling today? I smiled weakly. At least someone cared. Not great, I typed back. Another dizzy spell. Scott's gone to a meeting. Frank's response was almost immediate. Want me to come over? I can bring soup. Tears pricked at my eyes. That would be wonderful. Thank you. As I waited for Frank to arrive, I couldn't help but wonder what Scott's mother, Beth, would think if she could see us now. She had been so warm, so loving, the complete opposite of her son. Her death 5 years ago had hit us all hard, but sometimes I felt like I was the only one who still mourned her. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. "It's open, Frank," I called out. He entered, a thermos of soup in one hand and a concerned smile on his face. "Oh, Lena," he said, taking in my pale complexion. "You look awful, sweetheart." "Thanks," I said dryly, managing a weak laugh. As Frank busied himself in the kitchen, heating up the soup, I closed my eyes again. The dizziness was subsiding, but a nagging thought remained. Why hadn't Scott told his father he was going to a meeting? And why did Frank seem surprised to find me alone? "Here we go," Frank said, returning with a steaming bowl. "Chicken noodle, Beth's recipe. It'll fix you right up." I took a small sip, savoring the familiar taste. "Frank," I said hesitantly, "did Scott tell you he had a meeting today?" Frank's brow furrowed. "No, he didn't mention anything." "Why?" I shook my head, trying to dispel the growing unease. "No reason. I'm sure he just forgot." But as I ate my soup, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong, and for the first time I allowed myself to wonder, what if my illness wasn't the only thing threatening to tear my marriage apart? The next morning I woke to an empty bed and a pounding headache. Scott's side hadn't been slept in. Again. I reached for my phone, squinting at the bright screen. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. I dragged myself out of bed, ignoring the wave of dizziness that threatened to send me back down. As I made my way to the kitchen, I heard the front door open. "Scott?" I called out. He appeared in the doorway, looking disheveled and smelling faintly of alcohol. "Oh, you're up," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Work thing," he mumbled, heading for the stairs. "Crashed at Dave's. Going to shower." Before I could respond, he was gone. I stood there, my hands shaking as I gripped the kitchen counter. Work thing? On a Tuesday night? And since when did he stay at Dave's without letting me know? The lies were piling up, each one more transparent than the last. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was very wrong with my marriage. I pulled out my laptop, determination overriding my physical discomfort. If Scott wasn't going to be honest with me, I'd find the truth myself. Hours passed as I combed through our joint bank statements, Scott's email, he'd never been good with passwords, and his social media accounts. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then I noticed a pattern. Every other Friday there was a charge at a high-end restaurant downtown, a restaurant Scott had never mentioned going to, and always for two. My heart raced as I dug deeper. There were Uber receipts to and from an unfamiliar address, hotel charges in cities where Scott claimed to be at conferences, and buried in his email drafts I found messages to someone named Maggie. Intimate messages, loving messages, messages that should have been for me. I was so engrossed in my discovery that I didn't hear Scott come back downstairs. His voice made me jump. "What are you doing?" I slammed the laptop shut, my cheeks burning with a mix of shame and anger. "Nothing," I lied, hating how easily it came. "Just work stuff." Scott's eyes narrowed, but he didn't push it. "I'm heading out again. Don't wait up." As he turned to leave, something inside me snapped. "Are you seeing someone else?" The words hung in the air between us, heavy and accusatory. Scott froze, his hand on the doorknob. "What?" he said, his voice dangerously low. I stood up, ignoring the trembling in my legs. "You heard me. Are you cheating on me, Scott?" He turned to face me, his expression a mixture of anger and... Was that guilt? "You're being ridiculous, Lena. Is this because of your... condition? Are you not thinking straight?" The casual dismissal of my illness stung, but I pressed on. "Don't turn this around on me. Answer the question." Scott's jaw clenched. "I don't have time for this. I have a life outside of babysitting you, you know." "Babysitting me?" I echoed, incredulous. "Is that what you think our marriage is?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. "Look, I can't do this right now. We'll talk later." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me alone with my suspicions and a growing sense of dread. I sank back up onto the couch, my mind reeling. Scott hadn't denied it. He hadn't even tried to reassure me. And his reaction, it was all the confirmation I needed. My phone buzzed, startling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Frank. "Hey, sweetie, just checking in. Scott mentioned you weren't feeling well. Need anything?" I stared at the message, a plan forming in my mind. If Scott was going to lie to me, two could play at that game. "Actually," I typed back, my fingers shaking slightly, "I could use some company, and maybe some advice." As I hit send, I knew there was no going back. Whatever happened next, my life and my marriage would never be the same. Frank arrived within the hour, his kind face etched with concern. I hadn't realized how desperately I needed a friendly presence until I saw him standing in my doorway. "Lena, sweetheart," he said, enveloping me in a warm hug. "What's going on?" I led him to the living room, my hands shaking as I poured us both a cup of tea. "Frank, I think Scott's cheating on me." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Frank's face went through a range of emotions: shock, disbelief, and then a slow, simmering anger. "What makes you think that?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. I told him everything: the late nights, the mysterious charges, the emails to Maggie. With each revelation, Frank's expression darkened. "I can't believe it," he muttered, shaking his head. "Scott, my own son." "There's more," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I overheard him on the phone yesterday. He's planning a trip to the Pacific Islands. With you and Carol." Frank's brow furrowed. "What? We're not planning any trip." The realization hit us both at the same time. Scott was using his parents as a cover for a romantic getaway with his mistress. "Oh, Lena," Frank said, reaching out to squeeze my hand. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." I nodded, fighting back tears. "What do I do, Frank? I feel so lost." Before he could answer, the front door opened. Scott walked in, stopping short when he saw us. "Dad," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "What are you doing here?" Frank stood up, his normally gentle demeanor replaced by something harder. "I think we need to have a talk, son." Scott's eyes darted between us, realization dawning. "Lena," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "What have you been saying?" I stood up, my legs shaky, but my resolve firm. "Only the truth, Scott, something you seem to have forgotten how to tell." "You don't know what you're talking about," Scott snapped. "Dad, whatever she's told you." "Is it true?" Frank interrupted. "Are you having an affair?" The silence that followed was deafening. Scott's face went through a range of emotions: anger, guilt, defiance. "It's complicated," he finally said. Frank's disappointment was palpable. "I raised you better than this, Scott." "You don't understand," Scott argued. "Lena's always sick, always needing something. I can't live like this anymore." His words cut through me like a knife. I stumbled back, gripping the couch for support. "If that's how you feel," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "then maybe we shouldn't be married anymore." Scott's eyes widened. "What?" "You heard me," I continued, a strange calm settling over me. "I want a divorce." The room fell silent. Frank looked between us, his face a mixture of sadness and resolve. "I think that might be for the best," he said quietly. "Scott, I think you should leave. Now." For a moment I thought Scott might argue. But then his shoulders slumped in defeat. Without another word, he turned and walked out the door. As soon as it closed behind him, my legs gave out. I sank onto the couch, my whole body shaking. "Oh, sweetheart," Frank said, sitting next to me and pulling me into a hug. "It's going to be okay. We'll get through this." I nodded against his shoulder, too overwhelmed to speak. As the reality of what had just happened washed over me, a strange mix of grief and relief flooded through me. My marriage was over. The life I had built with Scott was crumbling around me. But for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. As Frank held me, murmuring words of comfort, I made a silent vow to myself. No matter what happened next, I would survive this. I would rebuild my life, stronger and happier than before. And Scott? Well, he would soon learn that actions have consequences. And I had a feeling his were just beginning. The days following my confrontation with Scott blurred together in a haze of grief and determination. I'd moved into the spare bedroom, our interactions limited to tense, monosyllabic exchanges. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. With shaking hands, I logged into Scott's email account again. I knew it was wrong, but I needed answers. I needed proof. And there it was, staring me in the face. An email confirmation for 2 round-trip tickets to Bora Bora. Not in Scott's name, but in the name of his parents. My heart pounded as I read the dates. They matched perfectly with the business trip Scott had mentioned last week. I dug deeper, my stomach churning with each new discovery. There were dozens of emails between Scott and someone named Maggie. Sweet nothings, plans for their future, complaints about me. It was all there, laid bare in black and white. But it was the photos that broke me. Scott and a beautiful blonde woman wrapped in each other's arms on various beaches, in hotel rooms, at romantic restaurants. The timestamps showed a relationship spanning months, maybe even years. I barely made it to the bathroom before I was violently ill. Hours later, I sat on the cold tile floor, my back against the bathtub, when I heard the front door open. "Lena?" Scott called out. "Are you home?" I didn't answer. I couldn't find my voice. His footsteps approached the bathroom. "Lena, are you okay?" The concern in his voice made me want to scream. How dare he pretend to care now? I looked up as he appeared in the doorway, his eyes widening at the sight of me. "Jesus, Lena, what happened?" "Maggie happened," I said, my voice hoarse. Bora Bora happened. Your entire double life happened, Scott." The color drained from his face. "What are you talking about?" I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. Just don't. I've seen everything. The emails, the photos, the trip you booked under your parents' names. It's over, Scott. No more lies." He slumped against the doorframe, defeat written across his features. "Lena, Save it," I interrupted, forcing myself to stand. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I want you out. Now." Scott's expression hardened. "You can't just kick me out. This is my house, too." "Is it?" I countered, a surge of anger giving me strength. "Because from what I've seen, you've been living a whole other life with Maggie. So go live it, but not here." He stepped towards me, his voice low and dangerous. "You're making a big mistake, Lena. You're sick. You need me." I stood my ground, even as my legs threatened to give out. "No, Scott. The biggest mistake I ever made was marrying you, and I'm not as helpless as you think." We stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Finally, Scott turned away. "Fine," he spat. "I'll go. But this isn't over." I watched as he stormed out, listening to the sounds of drawers being yanked open and clothes being thrown into bags. When the front door slammed shut, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Trembling, I made my way to the living room and picked up my phone. I had decisions to make, and I couldn't do it alone. "Frank?" I said when he answered. "I need your help. It's worse than we thought." As I filled Frank in on everything I'd discovered, a strange calm settled over me. The worst had happened. My marriage was over, my trust shattered. But for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of something I'd almost forgotten: hope. Whatever came next, I would face it head on. Scott and Maggie could have their fantasy life in Bora Bora. I was about to start a new chapter of my own, one where I called the shots. And God help anyone who tried to stand in my way. The shrill ring of my phone jolted me awake. I fumbled for it in the darkness, my heart racing. Late-night calls were never good news. "Hello?" I answered, my voice thick with sleep. "Lena?" It was Frank, and he sounded devastated. "It's Beth. She's gone." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Beth, my mother-in-law, the woman who had been more of a mother to me than my own, was dead. I struggled to breathe, to comprehend. "What happened?" I managed to choke out. "Heart attack," Frank said, his voice breaking. "It was so sudden. We were just having dinner and—" I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. "I'll be right there, Frank. Just hold on." As I hung up, I realized with a start that Scott wasn't home. Of course he wasn't. He was probably with Maggie, blissfully unaware that his mother had just died. I dressed quickly, my hands shaking as I dialed Scott's number. Straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice trembling. "Scott, it's your mother. She's gone. Call me back immediately." The drive to Frank and Beth's house was a blur. When I arrived, the sight of the ambulance in the driveway made it all too real. Frank was sitting on the porch steps, looking lost and broken. I rushed to him, wrapping my arms around his shaking form. "Oh, Frank, I'm so sorry." He clung to me like a lifeline. "She was fine, Lena. We were laughing about something on TV and then she just collapsed." Over the next few hours, I handled everything. I spoke with the paramedics, called the funeral home, and tried Scott's phone countless times. Each unanswered call fueled a growing rage inside me. As dawn broke, I was sitting with Frank at the kitchen table, both of us clutching mugs of cold coffee, when my phone finally rang. It was Scott. "Lena? What's going on? I just got your messages." The casual tone of his voice made my blood boil. "Where the hell have you been?" I hissed, stepping outside so Frank wouldn't hear. "Your mother is dead, Scott. Dead, and you've been unreachable for hours." There was a long pause. "What? No, that can't be right." "It is right," I snapped. "She had a heart attack last night. Your father has been devastated, and I've been here alone, handling everything. Where are you?" I'm out of town," he stammered. "On business. I told you." Save it, I interrupted. I know exactly where you are and who you're with. But right now, that doesn't matter. What matters is that you get your ass back here immediately. Your father needs you. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking with anger and grief. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of funeral arrangements and condolence calls. Scott returned, looking sheepish and guilty, but I couldn't bring myself to confront him. Not yet. Beth deserved better than that. The morning of the funeral dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the somber mood. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my black dress, a wave of determination washed over me. Beth had always encouraged me to stand up for myself, to be strong. She wouldn't have wanted me to live like this, in a marriage built on lies and betrayal. I looked at my reflection, really looked, for the first time in years. The woman staring back at me was tired, yes, but there was a fire in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. In that moment, I made a decision. After the funeral, after we'd paid our respects to Beth, I would confront Scott. I would expose his lies, not just to him, but to everyone. It was time for the truth to come out. And I was ready to be the one to tell it. With one last deep breath, I turned away from the mirror and headed downstairs. I had a funeral to attend, a husband to confront, and a life to reclaim. Beth would have been proud. The church was packed, a sea of black-clad mourners paying their respects to Beth. I stood at the front next to Frank, my hand on his trembling shoulder. Scott was conspicuously absent. Just as the minister began to speak, the church doors burst open. Scott stumbled in, his suit rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. The congregation turned to stare as he made his way down the aisle. "Sorry I'm late," he mumbled, sliding into the pew next to me. The smell of alcohol on his breath made me recoil. Frank leaned over, his voice a harsh whisper. "Where the hell have you been?" Scott ignored him, his gaze fixed straight ahead. I clenched my fists, willing myself to stay calm. This wasn't the time or place. But as the service continued, my resolve began to crumble. When it came time for Scott to deliver the eulogy, he stumbled to the podium. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't embarrass himself or dishonor Beth's memory. "My mother," he began, his words slurring slightly, "was a saint. She put up with so much from all of us, especially me." I saw Frank stiffen beside me. Scott continued, his voice growing louder. "She always told me to be honest, to face my mistakes, so that's what I'm going to do now." My heart raced. Surely he wouldn't. "I've been lying to everyone," Scott announced, his eyes wild. "To my wife, to my father, to all of you, I've been having an affair?" A collective gasp rippled through the church. Frank grabbed my hand, squeezing it tightly. "Her name is Maggie," Scott continued, oblivious to the shock around him. "And I love her. I'm sorry, Lena. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry, Mom." He stumbled back from the podium, nearly falling. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I stood up, my voice ringing out clear and strong. "No, Scott, you don't get to do this. Not here. Not now." All eyes turned to me as I made my way to the front of the church. My legs were shaking, but my resolve was iron. "Beth was a wonderful woman," I began, looking out at the stunned faces. "She taught me about strength, about dignity, about standing up for myself. And that's what I'm doing now." I turned to face Scott, who was staring at me with a mixture of shock and fear. "I've known about your affair for weeks," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "I've seen the emails, the photos, the trip you planned to Bora Bora under your parents' names. While Beth was dying, while I was planning her funeral, you were with her." The church was dead silent. I could feel the weight of everyone's stares, but I didn't care. "Beth deserved better than this," I continued. "She deserved a son who honored her, who lived up to the values she taught, and I deserve better too." I turned back to the congregation, my chin held high. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this. Beth would have hated the drama, but she also would have wanted the truth to come out. So here it is. My marriage is over, and I'm finally okay with that." With those words, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I walked back to my seat, ignoring Scott's attempts to grab my arm. Frank stood up, his face a mask of fury. "Get out," he said to Scott, his voice low and dangerous. "Now." As Scott stumbled out of the church, leaving a wake of whispers behind him, I sat there, my heart pounding. I'd done it. I'd finally stood up for myself, for Beth, for the truth. The rest of the service passed in a blur. As we filed out of the church afterwards, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Frank. "Beth would have been proud of you," he said, his eyes glistening with tears. "I know I am." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. As we walked out into the sunlight, I realized that this wasn't just the end of Beth's life. It was the end of my old life, too. And for the first time in years, I was ready to see what the future held. The weeks following Beth's funeral were a whirlwind of legal meetings, hushed phone calls, and sidelong glances from neighbors. I'd become the talk of the town, but for once, I didn't care. I was too busy reclaiming my life. I sat in my lawyer's office reviewing the divorce papers. The door burst open, and Scott stormed in, his face flushed with anger. "You can't do this to me, Lena," he snarled. "You're ruining everything." I met his gaze steadily. "No, Scott, you did that all on your own." My lawyer, a stern woman named Patricia, stood up. "Mr. Thompson, you weren't invited to this meeting. I'll have to ask you to leave." Scott ignored her, his eyes wild. "I've lost my job because of you. The firm says I'm a liability now. Do you have any idea what you've done?" A twinge of satisfaction coursed through me. "Actions have consequences, Scott. You made your choices." He slammed his fist on the desk, making me flinch. "You vindictive bitch. You've turned everyone against me. Even my own father won't speak to me." Patricia reached for the phone. "I'm calling security." "Don't bother," I said, standing up. "I'm leaving. We're done here anyway." As I walked out, Scott grabbed my arm. "This isn't over, Lena. You'll regret this." I yanked my arm away, my voice low and dangerous. "Touch me again, and you'll regret it. We're through, Scott. Accept it and move on." I left him standing there, shaking with rage. As I drove home, my phone buzzed incessantly with messages from friends and family, all expressing their support. But one message made me pause. It was from Maggie. "We need to talk. Meet me at the park, 3 p.m. My heart raced. What could she possibly want? Against my better judgment, I found myself driving to the park at the appointed time. Maggie was sitting on a bench, her perfect blonde hair windswept, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked up as I approached. "Lena," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry for everything." I sat down beside her, keeping my distance. "Why did you want to meet?" She took a deep breath. "Scott? He's not who we thought he was. He's been lying to both of us." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "He never intended to leave you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was just using me, and now I'm pregnant." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the bench, trying to steady myself. "Does he know?" I managed to ask. Maggie nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He told me to get rid of it, said it would ruin everything. When I refused, he threatened me." A cold fury washed over me. "That bastard," I hissed. "I didn't know where else to turn," Maggie said, her voice breaking. "You're the only one who understands what he's really like." In that moment, looking at this broken woman who had once been my rival, I made a decision that would change everything. "Listen to me, Maggie," I said, taking her hand. "We're going to get through this, together." Her eyes widened in surprise. "You'd help me? After everything?" I nodded, a grim smile on my face. "Scott hurt us both. It's time we fought back." As we sat there, two unlikely allies united against a common enemy, I felt a surge of determination. Scott thought he could manipulate and threaten his way out of this mess. He was about to learn how wrong he was. I pulled out my phone, dialing a familiar number. "Frank, it's Lena. We need to talk. It's about Scott, and it's worse than we thought." As I hung up, I turned to Maggie. "Are you ready for this?" She nodded, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "Let's take him down." In that moment, I knew we were on the brink of something big. The final battle was about to begin, and this time, I wasn't going to lose. 5 years. It's been 5 years since that day in the park with Maggie. 5 years since we decided to take a stand against Scott. And what a journey it's been. I sit on my porch sipping tea and watching the sunset. The sound of laughter drifts from inside the house, Jake playing with Maggie's daughter, Emma. It's a sound that never fails to warm my heart. The doorbell rings, and I know who it is before I even answer. Frank, his hair now completely gray, but his eyes as kind as ever, stands on the doorstep with a bouquet of flowers. "Happy birthday, Lena," he says, pulling me into a hug. As we settle in the living room, Jake joins us, Emma perched on his hip. The sight of them together still amazes me sometimes. After everything that happened with Scott, I never thought I'd trust again, let alone find love. But Jake... he's different. He understands my health struggles, supports me through the bad days, and celebrates the good ones. So, Frank says, a mischievous glint in his eye, have you heard the latest about Scott? I shake my head. After the dust settled from our legal battle, where Maggie and I exposed not just his infidelity, but his financial fraud and threats, I'd made a point of not keeping tabs on my ex-husband. Apparently, he's working as a night janitor at his old firm, Frank chuckles. Quite a fall from grace for the former hotshot lawyer. Part of me wants to feel satisfied to revel in Scott's downfall, but mostly I just feel nothing. The anger, the hurt, the desire for revenge, it's all faded away, replaced by a peace I never thought I'd find. You know, I say, bouncing Emma on my knee, I almost feel sorry for him. Jake raises an eyebrow. Really? After everything he put you through? I nod slowly. Don't get me wrong, he deserves the consequences of his actions, but living with that much bitterness and regret, it must be exhausting. Frank reaches out and squeezes my hand. Beth would be so proud of you, Lena. You've grown so much. His words bring tears to my eyes. Beth had always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. I like to think she's watching over us, smiling at the family we've created. As the evening wears on, filled with laughter and love, I find myself reflecting on the journey that brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the fight to reclaim my life, it all led to this moment. Later, as Jake and I get ready for bed, he wraps his arms around me from behind, meeting my eyes in the mirror. You okay? He asks softly. You seemed lost in thought earlier. I turn in his arms, resting my head on his chest. I was just thinking about how far I've come, how different my life is now. He kisses the top of my head. You're the strongest person I know, Lena. You took a horrible situation and turned it into something beautiful. As we climb into bed, I feel a sense of contentment wash over me. My health may still have its ups and downs, but I'm no longer defined by my illness or by what Scott did to me. I'm defined by my resilience, by the love I give and receive, by the family I've chosen. I think about Maggie and Emma, living in their own apartment nearby, building a life free from Scott's shadow. I think about Frank, who became more of a father to me than ever before. And I think about Jake, who loves me unconditionally, who sees my strength even on my weakest days. As I drift off to sleep, I realize something profound. The revenge I once craved, the justice I fought so hard for, it wasn't about making Scott suffer. It was about reclaiming my own power, about proving to myself that I could overcome anything. And I did. I survived. I thrived. And now, surrounded by love and peace, I can finally say I won, not because Scott lost, but because I found myself. And that, more than anything, is the sweetest victory of all. The crash of shattering glass jolted me from my fitful sleep. I bolted upright, heart pounding, as Martha's shrill voice pierced the air. Alex! Come quick! I've broken my favorite vase. I groaned, rubbing my eyes as I glanced at the clock. 3:17 a.m. This was the third time this week my mother-in-law had woken us in the middle of the night. I turned to Alex, expecting to see him stirring, but he was already out of bed, rushing to his mother's aid. It's okay, Mom. I heard him soothe from down the hall. We'll get you a new one tomorrow. I sighed, knowing full well who'd be footing the bill for that replacement. As I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my daughter Emily appeared in the doorway, her face etched with worry. Is everything all right, Mom? She asked, her voice small and uncertain. I forced a smile. Everything's fine, sweetie. Grandma just had a little accident. Go back to bed. Emily hesitated, then nodded and retreated to her room. I followed her out, determined to assess the damage. As I approached Martha's room, which used to be our guest room, I overheard her conversation with Alex. Oh, darling, it was such a beautiful piece. Imported from Italy, you know. I simply must have another one just like it. Of course, Mom, Alex replied, his tone placating. We'll go shopping first thing in the morning. I stepped into view, arms crossed. Alex, can I talk to you for a moment? He looked up, startled, as if he'd forgotten I existed. Becky, honey, can't it wait until morning? Mom's upset. It's important, I insisted, my jaw clenched. Alex sighed, patting his mother's hand. I'll be right back, Mom. We stepped into the hallway, and I wasted no time. Alex, we can't afford to keep replacing everything she breaks. Do you know how much that vase cost? He ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my gaze. I know, but what am I supposed to do? She's grieving, Becky. It's only been 6 months since Dad passed. I understand that, I said, trying to keep my voice low. But she's burning through our savings. The credit card bills are piling up, and Emily needs new clothes for school. Alex's face hardened. My mother needs us right now. Emily can make do with what she has for a little longer. I felt my temper flare. And what about what we need? What about our family? Mom is family? He snapped. Alex? Martha's voice drifted from the bedroom. Is everything all right? Fine, Mom, he called back, then turned to me. We'll discuss this later. Go back to bed. As he retreated to Martha's room, I stood there, seething. This wasn't the first time Alex had chosen his mother's comfort over our family's needs, and I had a sinking feeling it wouldn't be the last. I made my way to the kitchen, knowing sleep would elude me now. As I filled the kettle for tea, I noticed a stack of shopping bags in the corner, more of Martha's recent purchases. Curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked inside one of the bags. My breath caught as I pulled out a designer handbag, the price tag still attached. The cost was more than our monthly grocery budget. What are you doing? I whirled around to find Martha standing in the doorway, her eyes narrowed suspiciously. I was just tidying up, I lied, hastily shoving the bag back into place. She sniffed, clearly not believing me. Well, since you're up, be a dear and make me some chamomile tea. This dreadful accident has left me quite shaken. I bit back a retort, forcing a smile. Of course, Martha, coming right up. As I prepared her tea, my mind raced. How much longer could we go on like this? Something had to give, and soon. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a storm that would tear our family apart and force me to fight for everything I held dear. I stared at the credit card statement in disbelief, my hands shaking. The balance had nearly doubled since last month, and I knew exactly why. Martha's shopping sprees were spiraling out of control. Alex, we need to talk, I called out, my voice strained. He sauntered into the kitchen, coffee mug in hand. What's up, honey? I thrust the statement at him. This is what's up. Your mother's spending is out of control. We can't keep living like this. Alex's face hardened as he glanced at the paper. Come on, Becky. It's not that bad. Mom's just trying to feel better after losing Dad. Not that bad, I sputtered. Alex, we're talking thousands of dollars here. On what? Designer clothes? Antiques? Things we don't need and can't afford. He set his mug down with a clank. What do you want me to do? Tell her she can't buy things? She's grieving, Becky. It's been 8 months, Alex. Grief doesn't justify financial ruin. Just then, Martha breezed into the kitchen, decked out in what looked like a brand new "Good morning, dears. Alex, be a love and take me shopping today. I simply must have those new throw pillows I saw in the catalog." I watched in horror as Alex nodded without hesitation. "Sure, Mom. We'll go after breakfast." "Alex," I hissed, but he shot me a warning look. Martha turned to me, her smile sickeningly sweet. "Oh, Becky, I almost forgot. I accidentally spilled some wine on that quilt your grandmother made. I'll need you to take it to the cleaners." My blood ran cold. That quilt was a family heirloom, irreplaceable. "You what?" "It's just a quilt, dear," Martha said dismissively. "No need to get upset." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Alex quickly intervened. "Don't worry, Mom. We'll take care of it." As Martha sashayed out of the kitchen, I rounded on Alex. "How can you let her treat our things, my family heirlooms, like this?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "It was an accident, Becky. Let it go." "Let it go? Like I'm supposed to let go of our savings? Our future? Emily's college fund?" Alex's eyes flashed. "That's enough. I won't have you talking about my mother like this. She's family, and we take care of family." "What about our family?" I shot back. "What about Emily? She needs new clothes for school, but we can't afford them because your mother's buying $500 throw pillows." "We'll figure it out," he said dismissively. "Now I need to get ready to take Mom shopping." As he walked away, I felt something inside me snap. I grabbed my phone and dialed my sister's number. "Mackenzie? I need to talk. Can we meet for coffee?" An hour later, I sat across from my sister in our favorite cafe, pouring out my frustrations. Mackenzie listened intently, her brow furrowed. "Becky, this isn't healthy. For any of you. Have you considered counseling?" I laughed bitterly. "Alex won't hear of it. He thinks everything's fine." "And what about you?" she asked gently. "What do you think?" I stared into my coffee, fighting back tears. I think I'm losing my husband and my sanity." Mackenzie reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You need to stand up for yourself, Becky. For Emily, too. This can't go on. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Alex. Mom wants to redo the guest room, picking out furniture now. Don't wait up. I showed Mackenzie the message, my hands trembling with anger. Her eyes widened. The guest room? Isn't that where Emily's been sleeping since Martha moved in? I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. What am I going to do, Mac? How did it come to this? Mackenzie's gaze hardened with determination. You're going to fight, sis. It's time to take back control of your life, and I'll be right here to help you do it. As I left the cafe, a mix of fear and resolve churned in my stomach. I knew a storm was coming, and I had to be ready to weather it, for myself and for Emily. I stood in the doorway of Emily's room, my heart sinking as I watched her pack her belongings into cardboard boxes. The hurt in her eyes was palpable, and it tore at my soul. Mom, why do I have to move? Emily asked, her voice cracking. This is my room. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. Your father thinks it's best if Grandma has more space. Emily slammed a book into a box. More space? For what? Her stupid antiques? Before I could respond, Alex appeared behind me. What's going on here? I turned to face him, steeling myself. Emily's upset about moving rooms, and frankly, so am I. Alex's jaw tightened. We've been over this, Becky. Mom needs the extra space. For what? I challenged. Her endless shopping sprees? That's enough, Alex snapped. Emily, finish packing. You're moving to the basement today. Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. The basement? But it's cold and damp down there. I couldn't hold back any longer. Alex, this is ridiculous. You can't put our daughter in the basement. He grabbed my arm, pulling me into the hallway. I said that's enough. This isn't up for discussion. I yanked my arm free, fury building inside me. Like hell it isn't. This is our daughter we're talking about. Mom's comfort is important too, Alex insisted. More important than Emily's? I shot back. Our raised voices drew Martha from her room. She glided towards us, a look of feigned concern on her face. What's all this fuss about? Alex turned to his mother, his voice softening. It's nothing, Mom. We're just discussing Emily's room change. Martha's eyes lit up. Oh yes, I can't wait to start decorating. I'm thinking of a Parisian theme. It'll be simply divine. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Martha, this is Emily's room. She's lived here her entire life. Martha waved her hand dismissively. She's young. She'll adapt. Now, Alex dear, I need you to take me shopping for new curtains. I watched in horror as Alex nodded, completely disregarding the pain he was causing his own daughter. Something inside me snapped. No, I said firmly. Alex and Martha turned to me, shocked. What did you say? Alex demanded. I said no, I repeated, my voice growing stronger. Emily is not moving to the basement. This is her room, and she's staying in it. Martha's face contorted with anger. How dare you speak to me like that in my own home? Your home, I laughed bitterly. This is our home. The home Alex and I built together. The home where we raised our daughter. Alex stepped between us. Becky, you're out of line. Apologize to my mother. I stared at him in disbelief. Apologize? For what? For standing up for our daughter? Emily appeared in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Stop it! Just stop fighting! The sight of my daughter's distress fueled my resolve. I turned to Alex, my voice low and determined. This ends now. Either Martha goes or Emily and I do. A heavy silence fell over the hallway. Alex's face paled as he realized the gravity of the situation. Martha sputtered indignantly, but for once, she seemed at a loss for words. Emily moved to my side, gripping my hand tightly. I squeezed back, drawing strength from her presence. Alex looked between us and his mother, conflict etched across his face. Becky, you can't be serious. You wouldn't leave. I met his gaze steadily. Try me. As we stood there, the air thick with tension, I realized we had reached a turning point. There was no going back now. Whatever happened next would change our family forever. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the storm that was about to break. So, Alex, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, what's it going to be? The tension in our house was suffocating. After my ultimatum, Alex had reluctantly agreed to let Emily keep her room, but the rift between us had only widened. Martha, for her part, had retreated into a sullen silence, punctuated by dramatic sighs and pointed glares in my direction. It was in this strained atmosphere that Alex announced his grand plan to fix everything. "We're having a family dinner tonight," he declared over breakfast. "Mom's idea. She wants to smooth things over." I eyed him skeptically. "And how exactly is dinner supposed to fix this?" Alex's smile was strained. "Just give it a chance, Becky, please?" Against my better judgment, I agreed. That evening, I found myself helping Martha in the kitchen, chopping vegetables while she stirred a pot on the stove. "I hope you like bouillabaisse," Martha chirped, her tone overly sweet. "It's Alex's favorite." I froze, knife hovering over a carrot. "Bouillabaisse?" "Martha, you know Emily's allergic to shellfish." She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, I'm sure it's not that serious. Besides, she can pick around it." Before I could protest further, Alex walked in. "Smells great, Mom. What are we having?" "Your favorite, dear," Martha beamed. "Bouillabaisse." I waited for Alex to object, to remember his daughter's allergy. Instead, he grinned. "Perfect. I haven't had that in ages." My blood began to boil. "Alex, a word?" I pulled him into the hallway, keeping my voice low. "Have you forgotten about Emily's allergy? She can't eat that." Alex rolled his eyes. "Come on, Becky. It's not like she'll die from it. She can have a salad or something." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Are you serious right now? This is our daughter's health we're talking about." "You're overreacting," he snapped. "Just let Mom have this, okay? She's trying to make peace." As Alex stormed back to the kitchen, I felt a familiar hand on my shoulder. Emily had overheard everything. "It's okay, Mom," she said softly. "I'll just eat the bread." My heart broke at the resignation in her voice. "No, sweetie, this isn't okay." Dinner was a tense affair. Martha prattled on about her latest shopping finds while Alex nodded along enthusiastically. I pushed food around my plate, my appetite gone. Emily sat silently, nibbling on a piece of bread. "Emily, dear," Martha suddenly addressed her. "You've hardly touched your food. Don't you like Grandma's cooking?" Emily shifted uncomfortably. I can't eat it, Grandma. Remember? I'm allergic to shellfish." Martha's eyes narrowed. "Don't be ridiculous. A little seafood never hurt anyone. You're just being picky." "Mom," Alex interjected, "maybe you could make Emily a sandwich or something?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you kidding me? Your mother makes a meal our daughter is allergic to, and your solution is to have Emily make her own dinner?" Martha huffed. "Well, I certainly didn't slave over a hot stove all day to cater to her imaginary allergies. That was the last straw." Emily burst into tears and ran from the table. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Imaginary?" I seethed. "The last time Emily ate shellfish, she ended up in the hospital. But I guess that was just her imagination too, right?" Alex stood as well, his face red with anger. "That's enough, Becky. You're ruining dinner." "I'm ruining dinner?" I laughed bitterly. "You two are unbelievable. Your own daughter's health means nothing to you." As I turned to go after Emily, Martha's voice stopped me cold. "You know, Alex, I always said you married beneath you, and now look at the ungrateful brats you've raised." The room fell silent. I looked at Alex, waiting for him to defend us, to stand up to his mother at last. But he said nothing. In that moment, I knew. This wasn't just about tonight's dinner. This was about years of neglect, of choosing his mother over his family. And I was done. I met Alex's gaze, my voice steady. "Pack your bags. Emily and I are leaving tonight." As I walked out of the dining room to comfort my daughter and plan our escape, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Our lives were about to change dramatically. But for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. I sat on Mackenzie's couch, clutching a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. Emily was asleep in the guest room, exhausted from crying. We'd been at my sister's house for 3 days now, and I still felt like I was in a daze. "Becky," Mackenzie said gently, "you need to decide what you're going to do next." I nodded, my eyes burning with unshed tears. "I know. I never thought it would come to this." Mackenzie reached out and squeezed my hand. "Alex has called you a dozen times. Have you listened to any of his messages?" I shook my head. "I can't. Not yet. Every time I think about that dinner, about how he just sat there while Martha—" My voice broke, and Mackenzie pulled me into a hug. "I know, sis, I know." As I pulled away, wiping my eyes, my phone buzzed. Another message from Alex. This time, curiosity got the better of me, and I hit play. "Becky, please," Alex's voice crackled through the speaker. "Come home. We can work this out. Mom's agreed to move into an apartment nearby. Please just give us another chance." I looked at Mackenzie, my heart racing. He says Martha's moving out. My sister's eyes narrowed. And you believe that? The doubt in her voice mirrored my own. I sighed, deleting the message. No, I don't. Mackenzie nodded, then hesitated. Becky, there's something you need to see. She pulled out her laptop and opened a series of documents. As I scanned them, my blood ran cold. What is this? I whispered. Bank statements, Mackenzie replied. I had a friend look into your finances. Alex has been funneling money into a separate account for months, an account in Martha's name. The room spun as the implications hit me. All those times I'd questioned our dwindling savings, all the excuses Alex had made. He's been lying to me, I said, my voice hollow. All this time he's been stealing from you, Mackenzie finished. From Emily's college fund, from your retirement savings, everything. A wave of nausea washed over me. How much? Mackenzie's face was grim. Almost everything, Becky. If you don't act soon, there might not be anything left. I stood up abruptly, pacing the room. Anger, betrayal, and fear warred within me. What am I going to do? How can I protect Emily, our future? Mackenzie stood, placing her hands on my shoulders to still my frantic movement. You fight, Becky. You take control. Starting now. She guided me back to the couch and opened another document on her laptop. I've drafted divorce papers. All you have to do is sign. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. This was it, the point of no return. If I do this, I said slowly, there's no going back. Mackenzie nodded. No, there isn't. But think about Emily. Think about yourself. You deserve better than this, Becky. Both of you do. As if on cue, Emily appeared in the doorway, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. Mom, what's going on? I looked at my daughter, seeing the strength and resilience that mirrored my own. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. Come here, sweetie, I said, patting the couch beside me. As Emily sat down, I took a deep breath. We need to talk about the future. Our future. Emily's eyes widened as she looked at the laptop screen. Are we? I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me. Yes, honey. I'm filing for divorce. We're starting over. To my surprise, Emily's face broke into a relieved smile. Good, she said firmly. We don't need them, Mom. We'll be okay on our own. Tears pricked my eyes as I hugged my daughter close. Over her shoulder, I met Mackenzie's gaze and nodded. You're right, I said, reaching for the pen. We will be okay. As I signed my name on the divorce papers, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in years, I felt hope. Hope for a future free from manipulation and betrayal. Hope for a life where Emily and I could thrive. I closed the laptop, my decision made. Mackenzie, can you call your lawyer friend? It's time to take back our lives. The lawyer's office felt suffocating as I sat across from Alex, the divorce papers between us like a chasm. Mackenzie squeezed my hand under the table, a silent reminder of her support. Emily waited outside, insisting on being here despite my reservations. You can't be serious about this, Becky, Alex pleaded, his eyes darting between me and the papers. We can work it out. I'll send Mom to a retirement community, please. I steeled myself against the familiar pull of his words. It's too late for that, Alex. You've made your choice, time and time again. Our lawyer, Sarah, cleared her throat. Mr. Drew, we've outlined the division of assets. Given the circumstances, Mrs. Sullivan is entitled to... Entitled? Alex's face contorted with anger. She's not entitled to anything. It's my money. I felt a surge of righteous fury. Your money? The money you've been funneling to your mother? The money from our daughter's college fund? Alex paled, caught off guard. How did you? It doesn't matter, I cut him off. What matters is that you betrayed us, Alex, me and Emily both. Sarah intervened, her voice calm but firm. Mr. Drew, given the evidence of financial misconduct, you're facing serious legal consequences. This settlement is more than fair. Alex's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but he shook his head, eyes blazing. I won't sign. You can't make me. Then we'll see you in court, Sarah replied coolly. As we stood to leave, the door burst open. Martha stormed in, her face a mask of fury. You ungrateful witch! How dare you try to ruin my son's life? Mackenzie stepped between us, but Martha was undeterred. After everything we've done for you, Alex, don't you dare sign those papers. She doesn't deserve a penny. I watched as Alex's resolve visibly strengthened under his mother's influence. Any hope of an amicable resolution evaporated. Fine, I said. my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. We'll do this the hard way. As we left the office, Emily rushed to my side. Mom, what happened? I hugged her close, my heart breaking at the worry in her eyes. It's okay, sweetie. We're going to be okay. But as we drove home, the reality of our situation crashed over me. A lengthy court battle would drain what little resources we had left. How would I provide for Emily? How could I fight Alex and Martha's combined resources? At home, I excused myself and retreated to the bathroom, finally allowing the tears to fall. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the uncertainty, the fear, threatened to crush me. A soft knock interrupted my breakdown. Mom? Emily's voice called. Can I come in? I quickly wiped my eyes and opened the door. Emily took one look at me and wrapped her arms around my waist. We're going to make it, she said fiercely. We don't need them. We have each other. Her words, so full of conviction, pierced through my despair. I hugged her back, marveling at her strength. You're right, I whispered. We do have each other. As we stood there, I felt a shift inside me. The fear and doubt receded, replaced by a steely determination. Alex and Martha had underestimated me for the last time. I gently pulled away from Emily, meeting her gaze. Honey, I need you to be strong for a little while longer. Things might get tough, but I promise you, I'm going to fight for us with everything I have. Emily nodded, her jaw set in a determined line that mirrored my own. I know, Mom, and I'll be right here with you. In that moment, looking at my brave, resilient daughter, I knew I had to win this battle, not just for myself, but for her future, for the life we deserved. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. Okay, I said, more to myself than to Emily. Let's show them what we're made of. As we walked out of the bathroom together, I felt a newfound resolve coursing through me. The road ahead would be hard, but I was ready. Ready to fight, ready to reclaim our lives, and ready to build a future free from Alex and Martha's toxic influence. The real battle was just beginning, and I was prepared to give it everything I had. The moving truck rumbled to life outside our house. No, Alex's house now. I stood in the barren living room, surrounded by empty spaces where our life together once resided. Emily appeared at my side, her face a mix of determination and apprehension. Is this really happening, Mom? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I squeezed her hand. Yes, sweetie, it's time. As if on cue, the front door burst open. Alex stormed in, his face contorted with rage. What the hell do you think you're doing? I steeled myself, meeting his gaze. We're leaving, Alex, for good. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the bare walls and empty spaces. You can't just take everything. This is my house. Your house? I laughed bitterly. Everything I'm taking, I bought with my own money. Money you didn't manage to funnel into your mother's account. Alex's face paled. You don't understand. Mom needed. Save it. I cut him off. We're done here. As we moved towards the door, Martha appeared, her eyes widening at the sight of the empty house. What have you done, you spiteful witch? I felt Emily tense beside me, but I stood my ground. I'm taking back what's rightfully ours, Martha. You've taken enough from us. Martha's face twisted with fury. She lunged forward, grabbing a vase, one of the few items left, and hurled it at us. I pushed Emily out of the way, feeling the sting as shards of ceramic sliced my arm. Mom, Emily cried out. That's assault! Mackenzie's voice rang out. She stood in the doorway, phone in hand, recording everything. It's all on video, Martha. Back off. Alex grabbed his mother's arm, finally seeming to realize the gravity of the situation. Mom, stop. This isn't helping. I clutched my bleeding arm, adrenaline coursing through me. We're leaving now. Our lawyer will be in touch. As we walked out, I heard Martha's shrill voice. You'll regret this, Rebecca. We'll destroy you in court. The drive to our new apartment was tense. Emily kept glancing at my arm, worry etched on her face. Are you okay, Mom? I managed to smile. I'm fine, sweetie. It's just a scratch. But inside I was trembling. Martha's threat echoed in my mind. Could they really destroy us in court? I thought of the meager savings we had left, the uncertain future ahead. At the new apartment, reality hit hard. Our furniture looked shabby in the harsh light of the empty rooms. Emily's face fell as she surveyed her tiny bedroom. It's cozy, she said, trying to sound upbeat. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I'm so sorry, Emily. I know this isn't what you're used to. She turned to me, her eyes fierce. Don't apologize, Mom. We're free now. That's what matters. As we unpacked, my phone buzzed incessantly. Texts from Alex, voicemails from Martha, emails from their lawyer. Each notification felt like a blow, chipping away at my resolve. Late that night, after Emily had gone to bed, I sat on our second-hand couch, overwhelmed by the enormity of what we'd done. The apartment felt alien, a far cry from the home we'd left behind. Doubt crept in, insidious and persistent. Had I made a terrible mistake? Could I really provide for Emily on my own? What if Martha was right and they did destroy us in court? I buried my face in my hands, tears flowing freely. The weight of our uncertain future pressed down on me, threatening to crush my spirit. A soft touch on my shoulders startled me. Emily stood there, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Mom, are you okay?" I tried to wipe away my tears to be strong for her, but I couldn't stop the sobs that racked my body. Emily sat beside me, wrapping her arms around me. "It's okay, Mom," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." As I clung to my daughter, I realized the true magnitude of what lay ahead. This wasn't just about surviving a divorce or standing up to Martha. This was about rebuilding our entire lives from the ground up. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with legal battles and financial struggles. But looking at Emily, seeing her strength and resilience, I knew one thing for certain. We would face it together, no matter what came our way. I stood outside the courthouse, my heart pounding. Today was the final hearing in our divorce case. Emily squeezed my hand, her presence a steady anchor in the storm of emotions swirling within me. "You've got this, Mom," she whispered. As we walked in, I caught sight of Alex and Martha. They looked haggard, a far cry from the polished, entitled pair they'd been months ago. Our eyes met, and for a moment I saw a flicker of regret in Alex's gaze. But then Martha whispered something in his ear, and his face hardened once more. The hearing was a blur of legal jargon and tense exchanges. Our lawyer presented evidence of Alex's financial misconduct, of Martha's lavish spending at our expense. I watched as the judge's expression grew increasingly stern. When it was my turn to speak, I stood on shaky legs, but as I began to recount our story, the years of manipulation, the disregard for Emily's well-being, the betrayal of our family's future, I felt a strength I didn't know I possessed surge through me. "Your Honor," I concluded, my voice steady, "I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for justice, for a chance to rebuild the life that was stolen from us." The judge's verdict came swiftly. In light of the evidence, she ruled heavily in our favor. Alex was ordered to repay the money he'd funneled to Martha, and a significant portion of our assets were awarded to me and Emily. As the gavel fell, I heard Martha's indignant shriek, "This is outrageous! We'll appeal!" But Alex's shoulders slumped in defeat. Our eyes met across the courtroom, and in that moment, I saw the man I'd once loved, the man who'd been lost to his mother's influence. He nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of the justice served. Outside the courthouse, Emily hugged me fiercely. "We did it, Mom. We really did it." Mackenzie joined our embrace, tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you both," she said. As we celebrated that night in our small apartment, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would still be challenging, but for the first time in years, I felt hope for our future. Months passed, and slowly we rebuilt our lives. I threw myself into my work, earning a promotion that allowed us to move to a better apartment. Emily thrived in her new school, her confidence growing day by day. One afternoon, as I helped Emily prepare for her high school entrance exam, she paused, her expression serious. "Mom," she said softly, "I want you to know, I'm proud of you, for standing up to Dad and Grandma, for fighting for us. You're the strongest person I know." Tears welled in my eyes as I hugged her close. "Oh, sweetie, you're the one who gave me strength. We did this together." The day Emily's acceptance letter to the prestigious private high school arrived, we danced around the kitchen, laughing and crying in equal measure. As we collapsed on the couch, breathless with joy, I marveled at how far we'd come. "We made it, Em," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Look at everything we've accomplished." Emily smiled, her eyes shining. "We did, Mom, and it's just the beginning." That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on our journey. The pain, the fear, the uncertainty, it had all led us here to this moment of triumph. We'd faced down the storm and emerged stronger, our bond unbreakable. I thought of Alex and Martha, wondering if they'd found peace in the aftermath of our battle. Part of me hoped they had, that they'd learned from their mistakes. but a larger part of me realized it didn't matter anymore. We'd moved on, creating a life filled with love, respect, and mutual support. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. For my daughter's resilience, for my sister's unwavering support, for the strength I discovered within myself. We'd weathered the storm, and now, finally, we were home. Our story wasn't one of revenge, but of reclamation. We'd reclaimed our dignity, our future, and most importantly, our right to happiness. And as I closed my eyes, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, stronger than ever before. The doorbell chimed, shattering the peaceful Sunday afternoon. I froze, wooden spoon in hand, a pot of simmering marinara sauce momentarily forgotten on the stove. My husband Ethan's footsteps echoed down the hallway as he went to answer. "Mom," I heard him say, surprise coloring his voice. "What are you doing here?" My stomach clenched. Mary. My mother-in-law's unexpected visits never boded well. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped into the living room, plastering on a smile. "Mary, what a lovely surprise," I said, hoping my voice didn't betray my unease. Mary stood in the doorway, her perfectly coiffed silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. Her eyes, sharp as ever, darted around the room before settling on me. "Ava, dear," she said, her tone saccharine, "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Not at all," Ethan said, ushering her inside. "We were just about to have dinner. Would you like to join us?" I shot him a look, but he missed it, focused on helping his mother remove her coat. "Oh, I wouldn't want to impose," Mary said, even as she settled herself on our sofa. "I just needed to speak with you both about something important." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "Is everything all right?" I asked, perching on the arm of Ethan's chair. "Is it Henry? Is he okay?" Mary's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw genuine pain in her eyes. "It's your father," she said, turning to Ethan. "The doctor called this morning. His condition, it's worse than we thought." Ethan leaned forward, his face etched with concern. "What do you mean, Mom? What did the doctor say?" I reached out and squeezed his shoulder, my heart aching for him. Henry had been battling Parkinson's for years, but lately his decline had been more rapid. Mary dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "He needs more care than I can provide at home. The doctor, he's recommending a nursing facility." "A nursing home?" Ethan's voice cracked. "But Dad always said he wanted to stay at home." "I know, dear," Mary said, reaching out to pat his knee, "but we have to think about what's best for him now. The facility the doctor recommended is excellent, but—" I knew what was coming before she said it. "It's expensive," Mary finished, her eyes now fixed on me. "Very expensive." The room fell silent, save for the distant bubbling of my neglected marinara sauce. I could feel the weight of Mary's gaze, the unspoken expectation hanging in the air. Ethan cleared his throat. "How much are we talking about, Mom?" Mary named a figure that made my breath catch. "It was more than double our mortgage payment." "We'll find a way," Ethan said immediately, ever the dutiful son. "Won't we, Ava?" I nodded, even as my mind raced through our finances. We had some savings, but not nearly enough to cover this kind of expense long term. "Of course," I said. "We'll do whatever it takes to make sure Henry gets the best care." Mary's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "I knew I could count on you both." "You're such a blessing, Ava. I don't know what we'd do without you." Something in her tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was about Henry, about family. Whatever it took, we'd make it work. As Mary launched into details about the facility, I excused myself to check on dinner. In the kitchen, I stirred the sauce mechanically, my mind whirling. How were we going to afford this? What sacrifices would we need to make? The sound of breaking glass startled me from my thoughts. I rushed back to the living room to find Mary standing over the shattered remains of my favorite vase, a gift from my late mother. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "How clumsy of me." As I knelt to clean up the pieces, a shard nicked my finger. A drop of blood welled up bright red against my skin. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was an omen of things to come. The alarm blared at 5:30 a.m., jolting me awake. I groaned, my hand fumbling to silence it. Beside me, Ethan stirred but didn't wake. I envied his ability to sleep through anything. As I stumbled to the bathroom, the weight of our new reality settled on my shoulders. It had been 2 weeks since Mary's bombshell about Henry's care, and our lives had been turned upside down. The nursing facility costs were astronomical and our savings were dwindling fast. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, noting the dark circles under my eyes. "You can do this," I whispered to myself. Today was my first day back at work after 7 years as a homemaker. The thought made my stomach churn with anxiety. By the time Ethan woke up, I was dressed in my new business attire, a far cry from my usual comfortable clothes. He blinked at me, confusion clouding his face for a moment before realization dawned. "Ava, you don't have to do this," he said, his voice still husky with sleep. "We can figure something else out." I forced a smile. "We've been over this, Ethan. It's the best solution. Besides, it'll be good for me to get back out there." He pulled me into a hug, and I breathed in his familiar scent, drawing strength from his embrace. "You're amazing, you know that?" he murmured into my hair. As I drove to my new job at a local real estate office, my phone buzzed. Mary's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Ava, dear?" Mary's syrupy voice filled the car. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "I'm on my way to work, Mary. Is everything okay?" "Oh, yes, everything's fine. I just wanted to check if you'd sent this month's payment for Henry's care. The facility called, and I wouldn't want there to be any misunderstandings." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "I transferred the money to your account last week, Mary, just like we agreed." "Did you? Oh, I must have overlooked it. I'll check again. Drive safely, dear." The call ended, leaving me with a knot in my stomach. Something about Mary's tone didn't sit right with me. At the office, I threw myself into learning my new role, grateful for the distraction. My coworkers were kind, if a bit curious about the new middle-aged recruit. By lunchtime, I was exhausted but feeling more confident. As I unwrapped my sandwich in the break room, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Ethan. "Hey, how's your first day going?" he asked. "It's going," I replied, trying to inject some enthusiasm into my voice. "How are you doing?" There was a pause. "I just got off the phone with the nursing facility. They said they haven't received our payment yet." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I transferred the money to your mom last week." "I know. I told them that. They said they'll look into it, but Ava, I'm worried. This isn't like Mom to forget something so important." I bit my lip, Mary's earlier call suddenly taking on a sinister tone. "Ethan, I think we need to talk to your mother. Something doesn't feel right." "What do you mean?" His voice sharpened. "Ava, if you're implying—" "I'm not implying anything," I cut him off. "I just think we need to get to the bottom of this. Can you call her? See if she can meet us for dinner tonight?" He agreed, albeit reluctantly. As I hung up, my new boss, Sandra, poked her head into the break room. "Everything okay, Ava? You look a bit pale." I forced a smile. "Just some family stuff. Nothing to worry about." But as I returned to my desk, worry gnawed at me. What if the money hadn't gone through? What if Mary had? No, I couldn't think like that. She was Ethan's mother, for heaven's sake. As the day wore on, my unease grew. By the time I left the office, my nerves were frayed. I dreaded the conversation ahead, but I knew we needed answers. Pulling into our driveway, I saw Mary's car, already parked outside. My heart raced as I walked to the front door, steeling myself for what lay ahead. Little did I know, this dinner would be the beginning of a nightmare that would test the very foundations of our family. I sat across from Mary at our dining table, my fingers drumming nervously on the polished wood. Ethan paced behind me, his agitation palpable in the tense atmosphere. "Mom," Ethan began, his voice strained, "we need to talk about the nursing home payments." Mary's face remained impassive, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her wine glass. "What about them, dear?" I leaned forward, my eyes locked on Mary's. "The facility called. They haven't received the money for this month." A flicker of something, surprise, guilt, crossed Mary's face before her usual mask of calm settled back into place. "Oh, there must be some mistake. I'm sure I took care of it." Ethan stopped pacing and placed his hands on the back of my chair. "Mom, Ava transferred the money to your account last week. We have the bank statement to prove it." Mary waved her hand dismissively. "Well, you know how these things can be. Banks make mistakes all the time." My patience snapped. "Mary, this isn't a bank error. The money left our account and went into yours. What happened after that?" Her eyes narrowed, a hint of steel entering her voice. "Are you accusing me of something, Ava?" Before I could respond, Ethan intervened. "No one's accusing anyone, Mom. We just need to figure out what happened to the money. Mary's demeanor suddenly shifted, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, Ethan, I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner." My heart raced as I braced myself for what was coming. "I had to use the money for an emergency," Mary said, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "Your cousin Sarah? You remember her, don't you? She called me in tears. Her husband left her and she was about to lose her house. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." Ethan's grip on my chair tightened. "Mom, that money was for Dad's care." "How could you?" I know," Mary interrupted, her voice quavering. "I was going to pay it back, I swear. I just needed a little more time." I felt a surge of anger. "Mary, why didn't you tell us? We could have figured something out together." She turned her teary gaze on me. "I didn't want to burden you both. You've already done so much." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched on his face. "Mom, we need to fix this. The nursing home needs to be paid." Mary nodded, composing herself. "Of course, dear. I'll take care of it first thing in the morning. I have some savings I can use." As she spoke, a thought niggled at the back of my mind. Something about this didn't add up. "Mary," I said slowly, "how did you transfer the money to Sarah so quickly?" "Bank transfers usually take a few days to process." Her eyes widened slightly, and I knew I'd caught her in a lie. "Oh, well, I wired it to her. It was faster that way." Ethan looked between us, confusion clear on his face. "Mom, what's going on?" Mary's facade cracked just for a moment, and I saw a flash of calculation in her eyes. Then she burst into fresh tears. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I have a problem." "What kind of problem?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Gambling," Mary choked out. "I've been trying to stop, but I thought if I could just win big once, I could pay for your father's care and you wouldn't have to worry anymore." The room fell silent, the weight of Mary's confession hanging heavy in the air. Ethan looked shell-shocked, while I felt a mix of anger and pity swirling in my chest. "We need to see your bank statements," I said firmly. "All of them. We need to know exactly how much money is missing." Mary nodded meekly, all fight gone from her. "Of course, I'll bring them over tomorrow." As she gathered her things to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were only scratching the surface of Mary's deception. The road ahead looked rocky, and I wondered how our family would weather this storm. Ethan walked his mother to the door, their hushed conversation drifting back to me. As the door closed, he turned to me, his face a mask of pain and confusion. "What are we going to do, Ava?" he asked, his voice breaking. I stood and wrapped my arms around him, my mind already racing with possibilities. "We'll figure it out," I promised, "together." But as I held my husband, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets Mary might be hiding, and how deep this rabbit hole truly went. The alarm blared at 5 a.m., and I groaned, my body aching from another restless night. It had been 2 weeks since Mary's confession, and the weight of our new reality pressed down on me like a physical force. I dragged myself out of bed, careful not to wake Ethan. He'd been working late, trying to secure a promotion to help cover his father's care. The guilt of my new job adding to his stress gnawed at me. In the kitchen, I brewed coffee and checked my phone. A text from Sandra, my boss, lit up the screen. "Big client meeting today. Don't be late." I sighed, downing my coffee. The pressure to perform at work while managing our family crisis was overwhelming. As I rushed to get ready, Ethan stirred. "Ava?" he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "Go back to sleep, honey," I whispered, kissing his forehead. "I've got an early meeting." His eyes flickered open, concern etched on his face. "Did you hear from Mom?" I shook my head. Mary had been avoiding our calls since her confession, claiming she needed time to gather her financial records. Each day of silence only deepened my suspicions. "I'll try her again today," I promised, though the words felt hollow. The drive to work was a blur of anxiety and half-formed plans. How were we going to dig ourselves out of this mess? At the office, I threw myself into preparation for the client meeting. Maybe if I could land this account, the extra commission would help ease our financial burden. Midway through my presentation, my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. I ignored it, focusing on the potential client's questions. When we finally broke for lunch, I checked my messages. 5 missed calls from Ethan, and a text that made my blood run cold. "Dad's being discharged. Nursing home says we're behind on payments. Call me ASAP." My hands shaking, I ducked into an empty conference room and called Ethan. "Ava, thank God," he answered, his voice strained. "They're threatening to send Dad home today if we don't pay up." "But that's impossible," I sputtered. "We gave Mary the money for this month's payment just last week." Ethan's bitter laugh cut through the line. "Yeah, well, it seems Mom's gambling problem is worse than we thought. I went to her house this morning. She's gone, Ava, packed up and left." The room spun around me. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" "I mean she's vanished. Neighbors said they saw her leave with suitcases last night. Her phone's disconnected." I sank into a chair, my mind reeling. "Oh, Ethan. I'm so sorry. What are we going to do?" He sighed heavily. "I don't know. The nursing home needs $5,000 by end of day, or they're sending Dad home. We can't take care of him ourselves, Ava. He needs round-the-clock care." The enormity of our situation crashed over me. We'd emptied our savings account for last month's payment, believing Mary would handle this month. Now we were broke, with no way to care for Henry. "I'll figure something out," I said, my mind already racing. Just try to stall them. I'll be home as soon as I can." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the conference room window. The woman looking back at me seemed older, more determined than the person I'd been just weeks ago. A knock at the door startled me. Sandra poked her head in. "Ava, the clients are back. They're ready to sign." I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "Sandra, I need a favor." "A big one." Her eyebrows rose. "What kind of favor?" "I need an advance on my commission. A big one, and I need it today." Sandra's expression softened. "Ava, what's going on?" In that moment, I made a decision. No more secrets, no more trying to handle everything alone. I told Sandra everything about Henry, about Mary's deception, about our desperate situation. When I finished, Sandra was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay, let's go close this deal. Then we'll talk about that advance." As I followed her back to the meeting room, a plan began to form in my mind. We'd get through this somehow. And when we did, Mary would have a lot to answer for. I squared my shoulders and plastered on a smile. It was time to fight for my family. The sterile smell of the nursing home assaulted my senses as Ethan and I walked down the corridor to Henry's room. It had been a month since Mary's disappearance, and the strain was showing on both of us. Dark circles shadowed Ethan's eyes, matching my own. "Ready?" I asked, squeezing Ethan's hand. He nodded grimly, pushing open the door. Henry sat in his wheelchair by the window, his once robust frame now frail and hunched. His eyes lit up when he saw us, a spark of recognition that both warmed and broke my heart. "There's my boy," Henry said, his voice weak but filled with affection. "And Ava, pretty as a picture." I leaned down to kiss his cheek, noting how papery his skin felt. "How are you feeling today, Henry?" He waved a trembling hand. "Oh, same old, same old. Where's Mary? She usually comes with you." Ethan and I exchanged a glance. We decided not to tell Henry about Mary's betrayal, fearing the shock would be too much for his fragile health. "Mom's not feeling well today," Ethan lied smoothly. "She sends her love." Henry nodded, seemingly satisfied. As Ethan wheeled him out to the garden for some fresh air, I hung back, cornering Henry's nurse. "How's he really doing?" I asked in a low voice. The nurse, Sarah, hesitated. "He has good days and bad days. But honestly, Mrs. Thompson, we're concerned about his rapid decline. Has he been under any unusual stress lately?" I bit my lip, guilt gnawing at me. "Not that we know of. Why?" Sarah lowered her voice. "It's just, well, Mrs. Thompson Sr. was here last week. They had quite a heated discussion. Mr. Thompson was very agitated afterward." My blood ran cold. "Mary was here? When?" "Last Tuesday. I assumed you knew." I forced a smile. "Of course. Thank you, Sarah." My mind raced as I joined Ethan and Henry in the garden. Mary had been here, despite telling us she was out of state sorting things out. What game was she playing? As we said our goodbyes, Henry grasped my hand. "Ava, dear, could you do me a favor?" "Anything, Henry." His roomy eyes met mine, suddenly sharp. "Check the safe in my old study. The combination is your wedding date. There's something there you and Ethan need to see." Before I could question him further, a coughing fit overtook him. By the time the nurses had him settled, he drifted off to sleep. On the drive home, I filled Ethan in on what I'd learned. "I can't believe she came here," Ethan fumed, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "What was she thinking?" "I don't know." I said, "But I think we need to check that safe." An hour later, we stood in Henry's musty study. The safe creaked open, revealing a stack of documents. "What is all this?" Ethan muttered, leafing through the papers. My eyes widened as I scanned a bank statement. "Ethan, look at this. It's an offshore account in your mom's name. There's over $500,000 here." Ethan snatched the paper, his face paling. "That's impossible. Where would she get this kind of money?" As we dug deeper, a sickening picture emerged. False invoices, doctored bank statements, a web of lies stretching back years. "She's been embezzling from Dad's company," Ethan whispered, horror etched on his face. All this time. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Mr. Thompson took a turn. Come quickly." I showed Ethan the message, our eyes meeting in shared anguish. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Ethan's jaw clenched, a determination I'd never seen before hardening his features. "We go to the police. Then we go to Dad. It's time to end this." As we rushed out the door, the weight of the decision pressed down on me. We were about to shatter what was left of our family. But as I thought of Henry, alone and declining in that sterile room, I knew we had no choice. The storm we'd been dreading was finally breaking, and we had to face it head-on. The shrill ring of my phone jolted me awake. I fumbled for it in the darkness, my heart racing as I saw the nursing home's number flash on the screen. "Mrs. Thompson?" The night nurse's voice was tense. "You need to come immediately. Your father-in-law has taken a turn for the worse." I shook Ethan awake, and we dressed in a frantic blur. The drive to the nursing home was a nightmare of screeching tires and red lights that seemed to last an eternity. We burst into Henry's room to find a flurry of activity. Doctors and nurses swarmed around his bed, their urgent whispers filling the air. "What's happening?" Ethan demanded, his voice cracking. A doctor turned to us, his face grave. "Mr. Thompson has suffered a severe stroke. We're doing everything we can, but—" His words faded into background noise as I watched Henry's chest rise and fall with painful effort. How had things gone so wrong so quickly? Hours crawled by as we waited for news. As dawn broke, the doctor returned, looking exhausted. "We've stabilized him," he said, "but he'll need specialized care, more than we can provide here." Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by a new wave of anxiety. "What kind of care?" I asked. "There's a facility that specializes in stroke recovery," the doctor explained. "But it's expensive, and they require payment up front." Ethan and I exchanged a look of despair. We drained our savings paying for Henry's care here. How could we possibly afford something even more expensive? "How much?" Ethan asked, his voice hollow. The figure the doctor named made my knees weak. It was more than we made in a year. "We'll figure it out," I said, squeezing Ethan's hand. "Somehow." But as we left the hospital, reality crashed down on us. We had no money, no assets to liquidate, and Mary had vanished with the embezzled funds. "Maybe we could get a loan," I suggested weakly as we entered our house. Ethan shook his head, slumping onto the couch. "With what collateral? We're already mortgaged to the hilt." I was about to respond when Ethan's phone rang. He answered, his face darkening as he listened. "What is it?" I asked as he hung up. "That was the nursing home," he said, his voice trembling with rage. "They're threatening to discharge Dad. Apparently, we're 3 months behind on payments." "What?" I gasped. "But that's impossible. We've been transferring the money to your mom's account every month." Ethan's eyes widened with sudden realization. "Mom," he growled, "she never paid them. She took the money and ran." The room spun around me as the full weight of Mary's betrayal hit home. Not only had she stolen from Henry's company, but she'd also taken the money meant for his care. "We need to go to the police," I said, reaching for my phone. "Wait," Ethan said, grabbing my wrist. His eyes bore into mine, filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "Before we do that, I need to know something." My stomach clenched. "What?" "Did you know," he asked, his voice low and dangerous, "about the money, about Mom's embezzlement? Did you know any of it?" I recoiled as if he'd slapped me. "How can you ask me that? Of course I didn't know." "Then why were you so suspicious of her?" he pressed. "You've been uneasy about Mom for weeks. Why?" Anger and hurt warred within me. "Because I could see what you couldn't," I shouted. "I saw how she manipulated you, how she always had an excuse for everything. I knew something was wrong, but I never imagined it was this bad." Ethan's face crumpled, the fight draining out of him. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I don't know who to trust anymore." As I watched my husband break down, The man I loved reduced to a shell of himself by his mother's betrayal. Something inside me hardened. This ended now. I picked up my phone again, my fingers steady as I dialed. "Hello, police? I'd like to report a crime." The police station buzzed with activity as Ethan and I sat in hard plastic chairs, waiting. My hands trembled as I clutched a manila folder filled with bank statements and the damning documents we'd found in Henry's safe. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson?" A detective approached, his face grim. "We've located your mother." Ethan stood abruptly, his voice tight. "Where is she?" "She's being brought in for questioning. We'll need you both to stay here." As if on cue, the station doors burst open. 2 officers escorted Mary in, her usually immaculate appearance disheveled, her eyes locked onto us, a mixture of defiance and fear flashing across her face. "Ethan, darling," she called out, her voice sickly sweet. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding." I felt Ethan stiffen beside me. "No, Mom," he said, his voice cold. "No more lies." The detective ushered us into separate rooms for questioning. Hours passed as we recounted every detail, every suspicion, every betrayal. By the time we emerged, I felt wrung out, my emotions raw and exposed. In the hallway, we came face to face with Mary again. This time, her mask had slipped, revealing the desperation beneath. "You don't understand," she hissed, her eyes darting between us. "I did it for us, for the family." I couldn't hold back anymore. "For the family?" I spat. "You stole from your own husband, left him to suffer without proper care. How dare you claim this was for anyone but yourself?" Mary's face contorted with rage. "You," she snarled, jabbing a finger at me. "You turned my son against me. This is all your fault." Ethan stepped between us, his voice shaking with anger. "No, Mom, this is your fault. Your lies, your theft, your betrayal. It ends now." As the officers led Mary away, her shouts echoing down the hallway, my phone buzzed. It was the nursing home. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to discuss your father-in-law's situation urgently." My heart sank. In the chaos of Mary's arrest, we'd forgotten about Henry's precarious condition. "We can't keep him here without payment," the administrator said, her voice apologetic but firm. "We'll have to discharge him tomorrow." Panic clawed at my throat. "Please, we just need a little more time. We're sorting out a financial situation." "I'm sorry, but we've already extended too much credit. If you can't pay by noon tomorrow, we'll have to release him to your care." The call ended, leaving me shell-shocked. Ethan looked at me, his face ashen. "What are we going to do?" he whispered. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "We fight. We've come this far. We're not giving up now." We spent the night making frantic calls, to banks, to lawyers, to anyone who might be able to help. But as dawn broke, we were no closer to a solution. Exhausted and desperate, we arrived at the nursing home. Henry was awake, his eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. "I heard you found the safe," he said, his voice weak but steady. Ethan nodded, tears in his eyes. "Dad, I'm so sorry, we had no idea." Henry held up a trembling hand. "No apologies. You did what needed to be done." He fumbled with something on his bedside table, producing a small key. "There's one more thing you need to see. In my old desk, bottom drawer, this key will open it." Hope flared in my chest. Could this be the solution we so desperately needed? As we prepared to leave, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Mary's voice, shrill and angry, cut through the air. "You can't keep me from my husband. I have rights." Ethan and I exchanged panicked looks. How had she gotten here? What more damage could she do? As Mary burst into the room, her eyes wild, I knew we were facing our final confrontation. Everything we had fought for, everything we had endured, had led to this moment. With Henry watching, his face a mask of sorrow and resolve, I squared my shoulders. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The tension in Henry's hospital room was palpable as Mary stood before us, her eyes wild with desperation. Ethan moved protectively in front of his father's bed while I clutched the small key Henry had given us. "You ungrateful children," Mary spat, her voice dripping with venom. "After everything I've done for this family." Henry's weak voice cut through the chaos. "Enough, Mary, it's over." We all turned to look at him, surprised by the strength in his tone. He struggled to sit up, and I rushed to help him. "Henry, please," Mary pleaded, her demeanor suddenly shifting. "You don't understand. I was trying to secure our future, our comfort." Henry's eyes, once clouded with illness, now shone with clarity and determination. "By stealing from me? From our son? No, Mary, I understand perfectly." He turned to Ethan and me. "The desk," he said. Go now." We didn't need to be told twice. Leaving Henry under the watchful eye of the nursing staff, we raced to his old study. With trembling hands, I inserted the key into the bottom drawer of his antique desk. Inside, we found a thick envelope. Ethan tore it open, revealing stacks of documents, stock certificates, property deeds, and a handwritten letter from Henry. "He knew," Ethan whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "He knew what Mom was doing all along. He was gathering evidence." As we pored over the documents, the full extent of Mary's deception became clear. She hadn't just been embezzling from the company. She'd been siphoning money from their personal accounts for years, building a secret nest egg for herself. Armed with this new information, we returned to the hospital. The police had arrived, alerted by the staff to Mary's unauthorized presence. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. "It's time to tell the truth. All of it." Faced with the overwhelming evidence and Henry's unwavering gaze, Mary's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled. She confessed to everything: the embezzlement, the lies, the manipulation. As the police led her away, she turned to us one last time. "I only wanted what was best," she said, her voice small and broken. "No, Mary," I replied, finding strength I didn't know I possessed. "You only wanted what was best for yourself." In the days that followed, we worked tirelessly to set things right. With Henry's hidden assets, we were able to cover his medical expenses and move him to a better facility closer to our home. The company initiated legal proceedings against Mary, and Henry filed for divorce. Weeks turned into months, and slowly our lives began to find a new rhythm. Ethan and I grew closer through the ordeal, our bond strengthened by the trials we'd faced together. One crisp autumn morning, as we sat with Henry in the garden of his new nursing home, I felt a flutter in my stomach. Placing a hand over my abdomen, I knew with sudden certainty that our family was about to grow in an unexpected way. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling with joy, "I'm pregnant." The look of pure happiness that spread across his face was mirrored in Henry's eyes. As Ethan embraced me, I caught sight of Henry wiping away a tear. "Life goes on," Henry said softly, "and love, true love, it endures." In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of family, the family we had fought so hard to protect, I felt a profound sense of peace. We had weathered the storm, exposed the lies, and come out stronger on the other side. Mary's betrayal had nearly torn us apart, but in the end, it had brought us closer together. As I looked forward to the future, to the new life growing inside me, I knew that we could face anything as long as we had each other. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still legal battles to fight, wounds to heal, and trust to rebuild. But for the first time in months, I felt hope, bright and unshakable, blooming in my chest. Our story wasn't over. It was just beginning, and this time we would write it together, with honesty, love, and the unbreakable bonds of true family.